And we are live for week 8. How we doing, everyone? It is going to be a fantastic week. No more London time. I'm as awake as I have been in the last month to start the live stream. A lot of tough start-sit decisions to get through today. I'm pumped, man. A lot of fun games on our TV screens in a little over 3 hours. Let's go, man. We love Sundays. It is the best day of the week. Guys, if you're already in the YouTube live, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching live on TikTok, hit the follow button, and then come to the YouTube live, because the YouTube live is where you will find the better viewing experience. Good luck to everyone this Sunday. A lot of tough start sits to work through. Guys, we're going to be grinding for the next 3 hours. I've been up since London time zone, really since this morning around 5:30 a.m. We're ready to go. A lot of tough stuff to work through. I imagine some of my ranks will be tweaked a little bit as this live stream goes on. There is a lot of news still to come out. We're going to start this live like we've been doing before the London time games. I'm going to go game by game here before heading to the start sits. My thoughts on every single game, the most relevant players, the must starts, the must benches in each game. I got my QB rankings up on the YouTube live. We'll switch through the different rankings as we're talking through things. And then we will get to start sit mode, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of tough start sits in my leagues, in your leagues today. A lot of injury news to stay on top of today as well. Let's start with none other than this Ravens versus Browns game. All right, so the Ravens travel to Cleveland. They're 8.5-point favorites in this game. Guys, the Ravens are without all of their secondary today. They're without their top 2 corners in this game. That's very good news for Jameis Winston. No more Deshaun Watson. This is a good thing for the Browns offense. I do think that one of the underrated pieces of the Browns struggling, though, so far this season has been the offensive line. Not just Deshaun Watson. And, I hate to be the one to say it, but as bad as Deshaun had been this season, he was low-key having his best game of the year before he tore his Achilles last week. But we got famous Jameis in the lineup now. David Njoku, a must-start in this game. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, both good sleepers in this game. Cedric Tillman is startable in deeper leagues today. He had 18.1 points last week, 8 catches, 81 yards. The first game Cedric Tillman played any meaningful number of snaps was last week, 82% snap share. We should see something like that again for Cedric Tillman in this game versus the Ravens. And by the way, guys, the Ravens have not been very good versus receivers. We got this new matchup tab in the Walter Picks app now. This tab is extremely powerful. We got an average and rank section here now. The Ravens ranked 30th versus receivers this season, and they're missing their top 2 corners in this game. So, yeah, Cedric Tillman, start him. Jerry Jeudy, start him. David Njoku is really a must start. Unless you have Brock Bowers or Travis Kelce or George Kittle, you basically have to be starting Njoku. And I think Njoku might even be a better start than Kelce. I'll pull up the tight end ranks here on the YouTube live. Let me pull up the tight end ranks on the TikTok live as well. Yeah, I would go Njoku over Kelce today. Browns 8.5-point underdogs in this game. The Ravens have been cooking. Obviously, the Browns are going through all types of struggles this season. And again, the struggles on offense, it has not just been Deshaun. It's also been the offensive line. But I do think Jameis Winston has an interesting ceiling, at least passing yards wise, in this game with the Ravens secondary looking as bad as it's been. Nick Chubb, by the way, he's startable in this game. Not the best matchup here for Chubb, but he got through last week. He was inefficient, but scored a touchdown. He only played 35% of snaps. Pretty much all usage numbers should be trending up week over week for Nick Chubb. Definitely has a decent chance to score a touchdown. You could do worse than Nick Chubb. He's a top 30 running back option. Not a must start, but not an awful start. He's definitely not a must bench. On the Ravens side of the ball, Zay Flowers is a true game time decision in this game. This is one of the bigger injuries to watch. Zay Flowers has really dominated in terms of the receiver numbers for this team. Last week was a really big down week. I believe it's an ankle injury. It was reported earlier by someone as a hamstring injury, but that was incorrect. It's an ankle injury. And he's a true game time decision, making me really not want to start Zay Flowers at all, even if Zay Flowers plays. T. Higgins, by the way, he's in a similar spot. His injury is a hamstring injury, which is a little bit even more concerning to try to play through, like we just saw from Mike Evans last week. On the Sunday Live last week, I told a lot of people to bench Mike Evans because that game was on Monday night. He's over 30 years old, dealing with a hamstring injury, ends up trying to play through it, and we all saw how that went. Not good. He's out for multiple weeks now. We could see a similar thing with T. Higgins if he tries to play. Zay Flowers, not dealing with a hamstring injury, but a game-time ankle. They're 8.5-point favorites. They really don't need to push Zay Flowers in this one. Zay Flowers sits. I think that's great news for Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Rashad Bateman in this game. But really, the only two must-starts here are Lamar, Derrick Henry, and you can start Mark Andrews this week. Yes, not a hammy for Zay Flowers. It's an ankle. It's an ankle injury for Zay Flowers. So there was an incorrect report about that earlier this morning on Twitter. It is an ankle injury. It's been an ankle injury for a while. So the Ravens should handle this one. I think I'd take the Browns with the 8.5 points with Jameis Winston, maybe reinvigorating this offense with some hope. They also changed play callers from so far this entire season. We got a new play caller for the Browns today. So a lot of change for the Browns. Definitely a team to watch closely, see how they do without Deshaun, with a new play caller. Nick Chubb back, Cedric Tillman stepping up into a bigger role. All right, on to the Titans game. This is probably the grossest offense of the week. The Tennessee Titans. Calvin Ridley almost didn't play. He's going to play, though. He's battling through an injury of his own. Calvin Ridley projects as a top 30 wide receiver because I don't know where else the target share is supposed to go on this team other than Calvin Ridley. All the air yards are going to go to Calvin Ridley. All the targets. We got him for a 30% target share, still only projected for 11 points, though. His catch rate projection is like 50%. I mean, really cut his targets in half, and those are the targets that might be actually catchable for Mason Rudolph in this game. On paper, it's a good matchup. Lions rank second worst versus receivers this season. The Detroit Lions averaging almost 40 points allowed per game to receivers. Calvin Ridley does have a sneaky ceiling in this game. I think an interesting DraftKings play this week. He's the only guy other than Tony Pollard you could possibly consider starting, though, on this team. Treylon Burks is out. Obviously, Hopkins gets traded. We're going to get to see him on the Chiefs today for the first time. Pollard is also just a pure volume play. The Lions have been a really tough matchup for running backs. Don't feel great about Pollard this week, but he should see 20-plus touches in this game, both on the ground and through the air. So he is startable for sure. And then on the Lions side of the ball, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's got to be started, guys. David Montgomery, battling through the injury he picked up last week. He's going to play. He played through it last week too. But we saw what happens when Jahmyr Gibbs just gets a little bit more of the work. Just a little bit more of the work. Let me go to the running back ranks here on both lives. Let me know in the comments which ranks you want to see next. We're going game by game here really quick. Just start the live stream, what I think is going to happen in each game. Quick thoughts on all the relevant players in each game. And then we're going to go grind through start sits. Basically, the rest of the live. We'll talk through the free player props, DraftKings lineup, of course, as well. I do got 3 more free player props for us today. But yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs just needs to be started in all leagues, regardless of matchup. And we just saw it last week, guys. We just saw it last week. Vikings had been pretty good versus the run. Jahmyr Gibbs, 32 points. Running back 100, over 150 yards and 2 TDs for Gibbs. Has to be started in basically all situations. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams is out this week and next week, suspended for violating the substance, I think it was the substance policy. He took some substance he wasn't supposed to take, or he got caught doing it. So yeah, Amon-Ra is just one of the highest floor receivers. Ranks as wide receiver 9 this week just because the matchup versus the Titans isn't the best. And the Lions are 12-point favorites in this game. There is a very real risk in this game, the Lions and the Titans, that this game's kind of over. By the fourth quarter, Amon-Ra's not pushing it. Maybe Jared Goff doesn't even play the whole game. I mean, there's a possibility of that happening in this game. A 12-point favorite is very rare to see in the NFL. But the Titans just have nothing on offense. I mean, absolutely nothing. Laporta is not startable. He's not startable. I don't know how Laporta has done this bad this season. These all would have been close to season lows for him. Like almost 4 of his 6 games this season would have been season lows for him last season. I mean, he has 1 or 2 catches, guys, in 4 of his 6 games. Doesn't really make that much sense with the Lions desperately needing another receiver to step up. Still waiting for that week, though, from Laporta, and I don't think you can start him until we see it. All right, on to the next game. I think, by the way, the Lions probably cover that 12-point spread. I mean, it's a lot of points, but I just don't see how the Titans offense could possibly keep up in this game. Packers versus Jaguars. A lot of Packers players project very well today. Jordan Love is a must start. He's a must start. Let me switch back to the QB ranks here, then we'll go to the receiver ranks next. Jordan Love, there's really only 3 QBs I want more than Jordan Love. And it's the 3 biggest rushing QBs, Lamar, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen. That's the end of the list. Then it's Jordan Love. And we talked about this last week on London time between the Pats and the Jags. There has not been a quarterback that's done bad versus the Jags. That's why Drake May was a great streamer last week. I started Drake May in multiple leagues last week. The Jaguars have yet to have a quarterback finish outside the top 12 QBs versus them. That includes Deshaun Watson, who had his best game of the season versus the Jags. That includes Drake May last week, who had 21 fantasy points, QB6 versus the Jags. I mean, all of the last 6 QBs have finished top 7 in fantasy points against the Jags. And yeah, Jordan Love's going to keep that trend going. He projects his QB4 this week, could easily end up being QB1. So you got to go Jordan Love. Unless you have Lamar, Jalen Hurts, or Josh Allen. Josh Jacobs also is a smash this week. Need to start Josh Jacobs. I think Josh Jacobs really has RB1 overall ceiling in this game. We saw his best game of the season last week, 20 points, finally scored his first career receiving touchdown. Still only has 2 total touchdowns this season. 2 of those came in the last 3 weeks, though. He ranks 9th in rushing yards per game, 8th in rushing attempts. Packers should be leading in this game. They're 4-point favorites in Jacksonville in this one. So yeah, start Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love. Jaden Reed, also a very good start. Romeo Doubs, also a very good start. Tucker Kraft, also a very good start. I would say Jaden Reed is borderline must start. Romeo Doubs is borderline must start. He's more of a good start than a must start, but he's a wide receiver too. Solid wide receiver too this week for Romeo Doubs. And Tucker Kraft, top 12 tight end. We're going to get to Jaden Daniels here in a second. We're going to get to this Commanders game coming up here momentarily. But I do not think you can start Jaden Daniels. We'll get to that. On the Jaguars side of the ball, no Travis Etienne again in this game. That means Tank Bigsby startable. Definitely not as good of a start as last week. This isn't the Pats defense that he gets to play. And again, the Jags are underdogs in this game. And we talked about this again right around this time of the live stream last week with Tank Bigsby. He has a touchdown ceiling. We've seen it now in 2 of his last 3 games. Those were both in good matchups, though. He scored 2 touchdowns and over 100 rushing yards against the Colts and the Pats in his last 3 games. But in week 6 versus the Bears, he only had 24 yards, no TDs. And the problem for Tank Bigsby is he is not getting receptions. So he is a touchdown-dependent running back. He has 2 targets in those 3 games, 2 targets this whole season. He didn't catch his 1 target last week. I actually think it hit right off his hands. He's not running routes. He ran 6 routes last week. There's not a game where Tank Bigsby has ran more than 10 routes in a game this season. So in PPR, I'm a lot more skeptical of Tank Bigsby. Definitely still think he's startable without Travis Etienne in the lineup. The matchup versus the Packers is about average in terms of what they've allowed this season. They rank middle of the pack in basically every rushing statistic allowed. But if the Jaguars fall behind in this game, and I do not think the Jaguars defense stops the Packers offense in this game, we could see more Dearness Johnson than Tank Bigsby. Dearness Johnson is the preferred receiving back pretty clearly. He's running more routes. He's getting more targets. He's getting more catches. He's been more efficient as a receiver. So yeah, Tank Bigsby, an okay start, not a must start. And I think Dearness Johnson's an interesting PPR sleeper if you're desperate at running back. This game is one of the highest over-unders of the week. Actually, the highest over-under of the week is the Jaguars-Packers game. A lot of good starts in this game. Evan Ingram, must start. He's really a must start. Ranks as tight end 5. There's not very many tight ends I'm playing over Evan Ingram this week. I think I already mentioned the 4 of them. Brock Bowers, George Kittle, and Njoku, Kelsey, then it's Ingram. Ingram versus McBride, pretty close. I think I might go Ingram over McBride this week. I think they're in the same tier for me, though. And then Brian Thomas Jr., not the best matchup for him on paper, but you basically got to start him. The ceiling is so high for Brian Thomas Jr. We've seen him do it in good matchups. We've seen him do it in tougher matchups. This game should be high scoring. The Jaguars should be trailing. You kind of have to start Brian Thomas Jr. moving forward. He's looked like arguably the best rookie wide receiver this season. I would probably put him after Malik Neighbors. I still think I'd probably put him after Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously different receivers, but he's right up there in the conversation for sure. Christian Kirk, really not a good start. have not seen a lot of consistency or ceiling from Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's getting squeezed out a little bit with Evan Ingram back, Brian Thomas Jr., a better receiver than him. So he's really the number 3 on this offense without that deep passing role. He only has 1 touchdown this season. He's not the first on the team, in the red zone to look at. So I prefer to bench Christian Kirk even this game that should be high scoring, but he's not a must bench. All right, let's jump ahead here to the Commanders game because I'm seeing a lot of questions about that game. I know that game's in the later window, but Jaden Daniels is supposedly playing. And it does seem like he's going to play. Jaden Daniels is likely to play. Signs are pointing to him playing through this rib injury. This feels like a situation to avoid for fantasy. The matchup is not good here for Jaden Daniels. The Bears rank second best versus quarterbacks this season. Granted, they have not played the best quarterbacks. They played Will Levis. They did stop C.J. Stroud in week 2. They stopped Anthony Richardson, who's not been good this season. They did well versus Stafford and the Panthers quarterbacks. They did well versus Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence actually ended up with 18 points, the best game we've seen versus the Bears. But he got sacked 3 times, threw an interception, and no quarterbacks over 20 points yet versus the Bears. The Bears defense has been good, guys. The Bears defense is good. Jaden Daniels is not going to run as much with his rib injury. Almost no chance that he runs as much. So it's going to have to come through the passing game. No quarterbacks over 250 passing yards other than CJ Stroud versus the Bears. I think there's enough good quarterback options ultimately this week to avoid the uncertainty with Jaden Daniels. And this is my tendency when it comes to stuff like this. This is why I was telling people to bench Puka Nacua too on Thursday night. That was an L. That was a clear L. Puka Nacua looked great. He looked fine. Right on the first drive, he beat his player props of 28.5 yards. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, I would prefer to bench him if you have other good options. And there's plenty of good options at quarterback this week. Dak Prescott's available in a bunch of leagues. I'd start him over Jaden Daniels. Bo Nix against the Panthers, I think is startable over Jaden Daniels. Both those guys should be available in a bunch of leagues. Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, I'd probably start both those guys over Jaden Daniels. So yeah, I'd look for other options over Jaden Daniels. Tough matchup, battling through an injury. He's not going to run as much. He's got the chance of re-injuring too. He's one big hit now away, which is why I don't think he's going to run as much. I really don't think you can trust Jaden Daniels. And there's enough good free options on the waiver wire that you don't need to. The other part of this team, though, so Brian Robinson Jr., if Jaden Daniels is starting and he's not rushing as much, this is pretty big for Brian Robinson Jr., actually. And this is an average matchup for him. I think he's a pretty good start, though, in this matchup. I think he gets at least 15 touches in this game. He looked good last week versus the Panthers, as expected. He only played 37% of snaps last week, guys, versus the Panthers. Still at 71 rushing yards and a TD. I think we see Brian Robinson Jr. go back up to that usage we saw weeks 1 through 4. He's playing over half the snaps, getting the bulk of the volume in terms of the running backs. Terry McLaurin, I still think is startable in this game. Zach Ertz, I'd prefer not to start. I just don't think there's a real ceiling for Zach Ertz. Last week was his best week of the season. He had 40 yards, 4 catches, finished with 14 points and a touchdown. There's a floor here for Ertz, so he's not a must bench. I just think there's really a limited ceiling there. I'd prefer to start Jatavion Sanders over Zach Ertz. On the other side of this game for the Bears, Caleb Williams, he's startable against the Commanders for sure. DeAndre Swift, he's been on a bit of a stretch. They're coming off the bye in this game. The Bears are coming off the bye. They're 1-point underdogs in Washington versus an injured Jaden Daniels. I like the Bears in this game coming off the bye. Caleb Williams has gotten better every week for the past 3 weeks. They've had really good matchups, but this is not the worst matchup for the Bears. DeAndre Swift, definitely a decent start this week. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. 2 of these 3 receivers is probably going to do well today. Good luck guessing which 2 it's going to be. I think it's really between Keenan and Odunze. DJ Moore probably is the best option of the 3. Odunze, I believe, is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL right now. We really haven't seen it from Rome Odunze. I don't think Rome Odunze is a top-of-mind guy when you think of the better receivers in the league for most NFL fans, because we've really only seen 1 good game from Rome Odunze this season. I think we're going to see plenty more big games, though, from Odunze as the season goes on, as he gets better, his connection with Caleb gets better, and as Caleb gets better. So 2 of these 3 receivers probably going to do well. I think all 3 of these receivers are definitely startable, and I'd rank them as DJ, Keenan, then Odunze. Let me switch to the wide receiver ranks here, because I know there's a lot of tough wide receiver decisions. We're going game by game here to start out the live, and then we're going to get to the start sits, I promise, coming up here momentarily. So yeah, I think the Bears win this game. It's projected to be a close game. I think you got to stay away from Jaden Daniels in fantasy. until we see what his rushing usage looks like with this rib injury. Still a chance they hold him out, but it seems like he's trending towards playing. But yeah, I'd prefer to start Bo Nix over him. Bo Nix available in almost every league. Therefore, I think Jaden Daniels is a must bench. All right, let's go to this Panthers Broncos game, because we were talking about the Titans and how bad that offense looked. I mean, we got Bryce Young, so they benched Bryce Young for Andy Dalton to try to, build up Bryce Young's confidence a bit, sit him on the bench, and I don't know if there was a worse scenario for Bryce Young than what's about to play out for us in this week. They bench Bryce Young. They end up bringing him back. Andy Dalton got in a car accident this week. Sounds like he's okay, but that seemed to play a role in the starting of Bryce Young in this game. No Deontay Johnson this week. No Adam Thielen still. And he gets the Denver Broncos, who have Pat Surtain back this week. So they're trotting him out there without any real receivers. Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker and Jonathan Mingo. These are the top three receivers for the Panthers today. Jatavion Sanders is really the number two receiver. I like Jatavion Sanders this week as a sleeper. His role has been growing week over week. Tommy Tremble's looking like he's going to miss another game coming off the concussion. He had a 35% target share last week, but what's the real ceiling for Jatavion Sanders? It's not very high. I mean, it's in the Zach Ertz category. I think I'd probably go Sanders over Ertz, but it's close. Legette, really not a must start. I mean, whoever Surtain covers in this game is going to be a zero, basically. I mean, Surtain can dominate any of these receivers that he chooses. Bryce Young only projects better than, I actually don't think he even projects better than the injured Jaden Daniels. And then Chuba Hubbard, he's startable. The volume will be there. There's still no Jonathan Brooks in this game. But do you really feel good starting Jonathan Brooks? I mean, Chuba Hubbard, no, you don't. The rush share is there. He's going to get at least 15 touches, 20 plus touches, well within his range of outcomes. So he's startable. Broncos have been just average versus running backs. They've been really good against the pass, though. They've also been below average versus tight end. So again, Jatavion Sanders, interesting sleeper, but all these other guys, they're going to get crushed. This is also a massive spread, 11-point spread towards the Broncos. Bo Nix is very startable this week. Bo Nix is startable. Javonte Williams, definitely a very good start versus the Panthers. Courtland Sutton is startable this week. I don't love Courtland Sutton. He was on my do not draft list, but of all matchups, this is not the worst one. But really, the two players I feel best about on the Broncos side of the ball for fantasy this week, Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been running, guys. Bo Nix has a real rushing floor and a real passing ceiling in this game. He had 75 rushing yards in his last game versus the Saints. He's back-to-back games over 60 total rushing yards for Bo Nix. Didn't score a rushing touchdown in either of those games. He's had at least 14 points now in 3 straight. He's been over 20 points, 21 points in 2 of his last 3, and he's got a good stretch of games coming up here. Very good spot for Bo Nix. I think his floor is 15 points in this game. And then Javonte Williams could easily finish as top 5 running back in this game. He was a top 5 running back last week versus the Saints, who have also been completely crushed by running backs in the last couple of games. I mean, I think it's close to 90 points, guys, the Saints have allowed to running backs in the last 2 games. That's good news for J.K. Dobbins today. We'll get to that game momentarily. But yeah, Javonte in a smash spot here versus the Panthers. No defense has been worse versus running backs than the Panthers. They're allowing 31.2 fantasy points per game to running backs this season. I mean, wild stuff. They rank 31st in rushing yards, 32nd in touchdowns. They're getting absolutely smoked by running backs. And Javonte is coming off his best game of the season. I mean, Javonte's a smash start today. Really a must start. Javonte Williams. All right, let's get to a little bit more of an exciting game next between the Chiefs and the Raiders. So there's a narrative out there about the Raiders making fun of Patrick Mahomes. I think they said he sounds like Kermit the Frog, which he kind of does, like a little bit. That's a little bit based. But Pat Mahomes said, we'll handle it when we handle it back in the preseason. And here's the first game where they get to handle it. They get the Raiders, who are 9-point underdogs at home in this game. The Chiefs, the only undefeated team left in the NFL. It does not look like that's going to change. This week is 9-point favorites. I kind of like this narrative for Mahomes for his first game over 20 points. Why not? Versus the Raiders, who ranked 23rd versus quarterbacks. They're allowing 17.7 points per game. Justin Fields went over 20 points versus the Raiders. Bo Nix went over 20 points versus the Raiders. Andy Dalton went over 20 points versus the Raiders. Lamar Jackson did not hit 20 points versus the Raiders. And this is the type of thing that could happen with Mahomes too. What happened with Lamar in that game? This game might not be close. And if it's not close, we could see a massive Kareem Hunt game. Kareem Hunt, a must start in this game. Great matchup for Kareem Hunt. Back-to-back games over 18 points for Kareem Hunt. He's playing over 62% of the snaps. He's getting over half the carries. Back-to-back games, guys, with at least 20 carries for Kareem Hunt. Chiefs coming into this game as big favorites. You got it like Kareem Hunt. Travis Kelce's a must start, really, unless you have Brock Bowers, George Kittle, or David Njoku. You got to be starting Travis Kelce. I also think Xavier Worthy is startable in this game as a flex, upside flex play. Really not a good floor. We've seen that play out over the course of the season. I think we know what to expect from Xavier Worthy at this point, but I do think what the role was for Xavier Worthy last week, coming out of the bye week for the Chiefs, went very under the radar, very underrated. He had over half the air yards for the team last week, guys. He had a 32% target share. This was the first game we saw Xavier Worthy over a 20% target share. He had 32% target share out of the bye. It was clearly a focal point to get the ball more in Xavier Worthy's direction. And it went under the radar because he did nothing with it. 3 catches, 19 yards. That was it. He was missed on one big, deep play that should have been a big touchdown. Wouldn't be shocking to see somewhat of a similar trend continue. DeAndre Hopkins is going to play in this game. This was a good trade by the Chiefs. I think this is going to help them win a third Super Bowl. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is a must start in his first game. You know, on the spectrum of new receivers starting in their first game, I think he's probably behind Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams was a very unique situation given the relationship with Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's behind Amari Cooper in what we saw him do with Josh Allen. I think he'll be a little bit behind that. Could he get to 10 fantasy points and score a touchdown? For sure, he could. Hopkins is a good veteran wide receiver playing with Pat Mahomes on a team without Juju and without Rashee Rice. But I don't really want to start Hopkins in his first game. I'd much prefer not to. And I'm playing Jalen Hurts over Mahomes, seeing that one in the TikTok Live. We'll get to the starts this year coming up momentarily. Start the Chiefs defense. Not very many better defense options than the Kansas City Chiefs. So Mahomes a decent start in the Kermit the Frog revenge game. We got Kareem Hunt a must start, Kelce a must start. Xavier Worthy, I think, is a high upside flex option. On the Raiders side of the ball, Bowers is the only must start. He's the only guy I feel good about on the Raiders side of the ball. The Chiefs ranked dead last for his tight ends this season. I do have a little bit of concern with this current Raiders offense. And Jacoby Myers, it sounds like, is going to play. I actually think we have Jacoby Myers projected out right now in the Walter Picks app. Not going to change Brock Bowers' projection much. But the Chiefs have allowed the most yards per game to tight ends, the most receptions per game to tight ends. And even without the matchup, Brock Bowers projects as tight end 1 basically every single week. He ranks number 1 in receptions per game, number 1 in yards per game. So we got the number 1 tight end in receptions and yards against the number 1 defense to play in terms of receptions and yards for tight ends. I mean, Bowers could absolutely smash in this game. Bowers projects better than a lot of wide receivers this week. So you should feel very good with Brock Bowers. I'm a little nervous with the makeup of this Raiders team if they do just really focus in on stopping Bowers, which would make a lot of sense for the Chiefs defense to do. But Madison, I want nothing to do with. Trey Tucker really is not startable. DJ Turner, Gardner Minshew, none of these guys are really startable outside of Brock Bowers. I think the Chiefs, by the way, covered this 9-point spread. All right, we got the Saints, 7-point underdogs against the Chargers. A lot of big underdogs this week, guys. We have the Titans, 12-point underdogs. The Browns, 8.5-point underdogs. The Patriots, 7-point underdogs. We got the Saints, 7-point underdogs. The Raiders, 9-point underdogs. The Panthers, 11-point underdogs. I mean, wow. That was, 6 games of underdogs of at least a touchdown. In one of those games, there'll be a big upset. And maybe it'll be this Chargers-Saints game. We got Alvin Kamara and Spencer Rattler. Chris Olave's back for this one. I definitely think Olave's a good start still for fantasy with no Rashid Shaheed, even with Spencer Rattler out. The first target Spencer Rattler threw went to Olave, and then he got concussed on that target. If you guys remember back a couple weeks ago, Rattler was talking before the game about how much he liked Olave. Olave could see a 40% target share in this game. Would not be surprising. He's up against Bub Means and Jawan Johnson. I mean, Kamara and Olave probably going to combine for over half the touches for this offense today. Chargers have been a good defense this season. The Chargers are allowing the fewest points per game in the NFL. I don't think they're the best defense in the NFL, but still pretty impressive. They're allowing less than 15 points per game this season. Kamara's still a must start. He's coming off a stretch of kind of down games for him after a really hot start. Tough matchup for him, but usage-wise, you still kind of have to start Kamara. Still has a good chance at a touchdown. Rattler's off the radar. Olave is a must start or borderline good start. Kamara must start. Olave a good start. Nobody else in this team can really be started. On the Charger side of the ball, guys, start J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins is an absolute must start. He was a must start for me last week, too. A bit of a disappointing must start. Only 9.6 points, 40 yards. It was one of his least efficient games of the season, 2.9 yards per carry. J.K. Dobbins has now been under 4 yards per carry every single game since week 2. Dobbins has been struggling. Let me switch to the running back tiers here. I'll switch to the running back ranks here on the YouTube live too, guys. Shout out to everybody in this live stream right now. We are just getting started. We're going game by game. We're still got the Bills Seahawks game to get to, Cardinals Dolphins game to get to, Falcons Bucks game, Pats game, a couple more games to get to. Then we're going to go grinding through start-sit decisions for the rest of the live. So we're just getting started here. But J.K. Dobbins, an absolute must start. Despite the inefficiency that we've seen from him over the last 4 games, he gets the Saints, guys. This is really less about J.K. Dobbins than it is about the Saints. J.K. Dobbins, the volume should be there. J.K. Dobbins should see at least 15 touches in this game. We've seen J.K. Dobbins hit that threshold in basically every game this season. We have not seen J.K. Dobbins have less than 15 touches since week 1. He had 17 touches last week. And now he gets the Saints. And guys, the Saints, they've allowed almost 100 points to running backs in the last 2 games. Literally almost 100 points. Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, Javonte Williams, all were top 12 running backs versus the Saints in their last 2 games. So yeah, you got to start Dobbins. Very high floor, pretty solid ceiling as well. Justin Herbert, not a must start, not really a good start. Ladd McConkey, he's battling through a hip injury. He is expected to play. He had 5 catches, 46 yards last week. He actually had some of his best usage last week in terms of snap percentage, but in terms of the target share, not that great. Definitely not a must start, Ladd McConkey. Dobbins is really the only must start. Dobbins and Kamara are the only must starts really in this game. All right, on to some more close projected games. We got the Bills-Seahawks game here. Bills only 3-point favorites in Seattle. A lot of respect here for the Seattle Seahawks. Josh Allen, obviously a must start. James Cook is a must start. The Seahawks have struggled versus running backs this season. James Cook has not had more than 10 points since week 5. He's been under 10 points in 3 of his last 4 games, and he missed week 6, so we're not going to count that one against him. But he was back up to a pretty good usage rate last week, 60% rush share, 12 carries for James Cook. He only ran 13 routes and didn't get a target. But make no mistake about it, guys, James Cook's still one of the most efficient receiving backs in the league, averaging 11.2 yards per reception, which ranks near the top of the league. Last year, James Cook, his yards per reception was 9.1, which ranked 5th best in the NFL among running backs. He's even above that this season. I think we see him get involved in the receiving game today. Definitely a solid option. Top 15 running back option for sure. James Cook right in the solid tier 3 for me. He's right between Alvin Kamara and J.K. Dobbins. James Cook for J.K. Dobbins, I think that's an extremely difficult start-sit decision. Saw someone talking through that start-sit in our Discord. I'll be in the Discord, by the way, really the last 30 minutes leading up to kickoff. I'll be in the Discord with all the Walter Pick subscribers, making sure I get to all their start-sits as well. The best way you guys could possibly support me is downloading the Walter Picks app, checking it out. It's free. It's in the TikTok bio, in the YouTube description. And if you subscribe to one of the premium subscriptions in the Walter Picks app, you also get access to our premium Discord, which I'm chatting in constantly throughout the week and leading up to the games. But yeah, James Cook, definitely a must start. Amari Cooper, borderline must start. He really is a borderline must start in this game. Projects really, really well. It's hard not to start Amari Cooper after what we saw last week in his first game where he only played 19 snaps. He only ran 11 routes. You know, he's going to play more than that this week. At least up to 50% snap share in this game. It's projected to be close, playing with the best QB he's ever played with in Josh Allen. So yeah, I feel pretty good about Amari Cooper despite the matchup. All these other receivers I really don't feel great about. Dalton Kincaid, I don't feel too good about. The Seahawks haven't been great versus tight ends, but he feels like a very risky tight end option in comparison to some of the other tight ends. He only had 3 catches last week. He's only scored 1 touchdown this season. The target share has been kind of consistent for him, at least. I mean, he is the second best receiving weapon on the team, but Khalil Shakir is going to be involved. Keon Coleman's still going to be involved. I don't feel great starting Keon Coleman in this game, but Keon Coleman quietly had a breakout game last week. Best game of the season by far. 22% target share, his highest target share of the season, his most yards of the season, tied a career high in catches, yards. I mean, really a breakout game for him. Very much on the radar, but not a must start. That's it for the Bills. So start Josh Allen, start James Cook, start Amari Cooper. I'm a little bit skittish on Kincaid, but he's a top 10 tight end option still startable. And then Shakir, Keon Coleman, they're similar to Xavier Worthy in a way, where they're just upside flex options. Definitely not any solid amount of floor there. On the Seahawks side of the ball, and Weatherman Sam does have some comments on this game, by the way. This is the weather game of the week. We'll get to that in a second, and why I feel really good about the running backs in this game. Kenneth Walker has to be started in this matchup. Has to be started. Geno Smith, I really don't want to start Geno in this game. There's no DK Metcalf in this game, which makes both Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett pretty good starts this week. One of these two guys is going to be a solid wide receiver 2 this week, and with a wide receiver 1 ceiling. We got JSN projected ahead of Lockett in the Walter Picks app. I think the floor is maybe a bit better for JSN. The ceiling maybe a bit better for Lockett. I mean, it's a close call here between these two guys. I think maybe this projection should be a little bit closer, arguably. But both these guys, clearly project better without DK Metcalf. Metcalf, by the way, not officially ruled out yet, but he's been trending that way all week. I'd be pretty surprised if Metcalf played. They're saying he's going to try to test it out pregame. I would be pretty surprised. If Bo Nix has 60-plus rushing yards today against the Panthers, he will become just the 6th rookie QB to have 3 straight 60-plus rushing yard games. It'd be Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Vince Young, Bobby Douglas, and Bo Nix. Wow, pretty crazy stuff. All right, let's get to – so for the Seahawks, I think JSN and Lockett are still borderline must-starts, and they're definitely in the good start category. Kenneth Walker's the only must-start, though, really, on this team. So Weatherman Sam does have a comment on this game really quickly. There is weather to be aware of in this game, in this Bills-Seahawks game. This is the only weather report really of the day. The Bills-Seahawks game, we're going to get sustained winds around 17 miles an hour, around 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts. There's going to be times where there's wind gusts over 25 miles an hour in this Bills-Seahawks game. And there's going to be heavy rain on and off throughout the game. So it's not going to be downpouring rain at all moments of the game, but there will be periods of the game with extremely heavy rain, along with the sustained wind and the wind gusts. As a reminder for those new here, Weatherman Sam is here for you. I've done a lot of research about how weather impacts NFL offenses because everyone always freaks out about the weather. And a lot of times people freak out way too much. They overreact to the weather. We've already seen it multiple times this season. I mean, there really has been very few concerning weather reports so far this season, but there's still been times where people are, up in arms about how the weather is going to be impacting things. And it really has for the most part this season. The thing that is most concerning in the NFL when it comes to weather is wind over 25 miles an hour. And we might have a little bit in this game of that, but it's not going to be like throughout the whole game. We got 25-mile-an-hour winds or more. So I have this as a moderate passing game concern. With the 25-plus mile-an-hour wind gusts and heavy rain on top of that, like on its own, each of these things, I probably would be telling you guys don't concern at all. Together, these two things, I do have a little bit of concern for the passing game. Enough that I think in close start sits, you go with the other option. And this also makes me even more bullish on Kenneth Walker and James Cook. I also think this maybe pushes me a little bit more towards JSN over Tyler Lockett, the short passing game over the long passing game. We could see that play out in this game for sure. So again, Weatherman Sam report here for the Bills and Seahawks game. We got wind over 25 mile an hour gusting throughout the game, but the sustained winds are around 15 to 17 miles an hour. There's also, though, going to be heavy rain on and off. So there's going to be moments in this game where it's going to be totally easy to pass. The wind's not gusting over 25 miles an hour and it's not even raining. But then there's going to be other moments in this game where it's downpouring rain and we're getting wind gusts over 25 miles an hour. So, mixed signals here. So I'm not fully concerned. I'm not saying we need to fade these passing offenses entirely. I still think JSN's pretty much a must start. And then Tyler Lockett's still a good start. I still think Amari Cooper's a good start. I still think Josh Allen is a must start. And I definitely still like Kenneth Walker and James Cook. So not entirely terrified of this game. This game still should be close and high scoring. All right, that's it for the Bills-Seahawks game. All right, we got a couple more games to run through here. We're going to talk about the Eagles-Bengals, Falcons-Bucks, Cardinals-Dolphins, Jets-Pats. We got to get to the Colts-Texans too. And then we got just a couple more games from there. And then we're going to get to the start sits. Let me know in the comments which you got wide receivers. I'll go to the wide receivers next here on the TikTok live. Hop to the wide receivers on the YouTube live here as well. Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, so let's hop to this Cardinals game. Let's hop to this Cardinals game now. I know there's some tough start sits in this Cardinals game. And I'm here to be as helpful as possible. I'm going to give you all the information I can to help you guys make your own best decisions. I'm not starting Zay Flowers. We already talked about that game. Well, this will be the Laporta breakout game. Emil, I could see it. I could. There's no Jameson Williams. We talked about that Lions game. I still think you kind of have to start. You gotta have to bench Laporta unless you have a very good feel of that breakout game coming. But for me, I want to see the game before starting him in fantasy. I've been feeling that that game's been coming for a while, and it hasn't. He has two or fewer catches in more than half his games this season, which would have been an anomaly last season. All right, onto this Cardinals game before I jump ahead here to the start sits. Very excited to talk through some of these start sits because there's definitely some tough ones today. The Cardinals, they're 4-point underdogs in Miami today. The Dolphins defense has ranked really well. I feel like they've ranked better than they are. The Dolphins defense ranks fewest points per game to quarterbacks. But then you look at the quarterbacks they played. Guys, look at who the Dolphins defense has played. They played Trevor Lawrence in week 1. Josh Allen, they did really well against in week 2. Geno Smith did nothing. Will Levis, Mason Rudolph did nothing. Jacoby Brissett, Anthony Richardson, like their last stretch of quarterbacks is a joke. And then also their offense was a joke for a stretch of these games, which made the games just really low scoring. But guys, the Dolphins, they've allowed the fewest passing yards per game. They've allowed the fewest passing touchdowns per game. The third fewest completions per game. The completion percentage versus them is the fifth fewest. I mean, the Dolphins defense has played really well versus QBs. Kyler Murray is not a must start today. Would I start him over Trevor Lawrence? Probably. Yeah, I think I probably would. I think I probably would do that one. Let's see where Trevor Lawrence ranks. Yeah, they're actually back to back here in the ranks. Wow, I think I still would go with Kyler there, just because of the rushing. Let me go back to the Cardinals here. So Marvin Harrison Jr., not a must start this week, but I still think he's a okay start. I still think he's a good start. I think he's one of the more underrated receivers right now, too, just across fantasy. I think he's a good buy low with his schedule down the stretch. He gets 2 very good matchups to start the fantasy football playoffs. A tough schedule really coming up, though. He still had 40% of the air yards for the Cardinals last week. Still had a 24% target share. He's been over a 23% target share now in 5 of his last 6 games, Marvin Harrison Jr. I know he's been at under 10 points in 3 straight. He had a donut in there too in week 6. He had 6 or fewer points in 3 straight games. But I still think he's an okay start with the role he has. James Conner, same thing. Not a must start, but a good start. He's coming off 101 yards. Pretty good game from him versus a good Chargers defense. He played 85% of snaps, his highest of the season last week. Seeing consistent carries, seeing consistent targets. Dolphins have struggled versus running backs across versus all other positions. So yeah, James Conner's really borderline must start. Definitely a good start. Trey McBride, a good start. There's 5 tight ends I'm starting over Trey McBride this week. Who I would argue Trey McBride is right up there in contention for the best tight end role in the league. I'm still starting Bowers over him for sure. Kittle, Njoku, Kelsey, and Evan Ingram I'm starting over McBride. Then it's McBride. McBride ranks 3rd in receptions, 4th in receiving yards. He's played the 2nd most snaps. He's the highest target share among all tight ends still. Guys, Trey McBride doesn't have a game under a 17% target share this whole season. And there's only one game he's under a 25% target share this whole season. And his target share this season is 26%. He leads all tight ends in target share and air yards. So yeah, he arguably does have the best tight end role in fantasy. But with the matchup, I'm okay going those other 5 tight ends over him. None of these other guys are startable at all. So Kyler Murray, a back-end quarterback 1, high-end QB 2 for me this week. Switch to the QBs here. I would start Bo Nix over Kyler Murray. I would start Pat Mahomes, Geno Smith, CJ Stroud, Kirk Cousins, Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott over Kyler Murray. Go to QB ranks here again on the YouTube Live as well. On the Dolphins side of the ball, Tua's back. And we have talked about this at length for really 6 weeks now. I was actually at this game that Tua got hurt. It's the one game I've been to this season. It was an ugly game. People also forget, I feel like in this game, it got masked a little bit. Before the injury, this wasn't one of those situations where Tua got hurt and they came back and was playing terrible. Before the injury, Tua was having one of his worst games of his NFL career. He threw 3 picks in this game. One of them was a pick 6. He was missing open receivers. He only had a 60% completion percentage. Not to bash on Tua, while he's down, but he played really bad against the Bills before that injury. I do still think clearly this is a huge lift for the Dolphins offense. Just an interesting note to slot away about Tua in his last game. I mean, we've seen 2 games from Tua this season, and one of them was bad. Or we've really seen 1.5 games. But Tyreek, he's a top 5 option again. Have to start Tyreek Hill. Could easily be the wide receiver 1 this week. His prop lines are back in the 80s. If you were forced me to take a side there, I'm going to the over on Tyreek Hill. We've seen 1 full game with Tua and Tyreek Hill. Tua had 7 catches, 130 yards, TD. And he almost had another long touchdown in that game too. Achane projects as top 12 running back again. Have to start Devon Achane. I do wonder how much more we see Jalen Wright mixed in. Jalen Wright's he looked pretty good and explosive last game. Maybe he overtakes Raheem Mostert, who fumbled last week. Kind of almost lost the game for the Dolphins, arguably, that fumble. Waddle's also a good start with Tua back. Definitely a little bit more risky than Tyreek. We have not seen a game over 10 points from Waddle since week 1 when he played the Jags and Tua was playing. Again, it's a little bit murky here with the one full game we saw from Tua was against the Jags, who are bottom 3 defense in the NFL. But the Cardinals have not been great first receivers. I mean, they rank 5th worst first receivers. So yeah, fire up Tyreek and Waddle with a lot of confidence. Tyreek's a must start. Achane's a must start. Waddle is a good start. Tua is really not a great start. He's startable, but I'd prefer not to start him. And I've seen some Jonnu Smith start sits. He's right outside the top 20 tight ends for me. This week, he's coming off a massive game, obviously without Tua. The one game with Tua in week 1, he had 1 catch, 7 yards. I mean, guys, the floor for Jonnu Smith is 0 points. The floor is 0 points. I know he's coming off a big ceiling game, 22.6 points. He was tight end 2 last week, 7 catches, 96 yards, and a TD for Jonnu Smith last week. He still has not played a game over half the snaps. I mean, he had a 32% target share last week. There's almost no way that happens with Tua back. I think the floor is just really low for Jonnu. At least he has somewhat of a ceiling, but really not a guy I want to be starting. I think, by the way, that this game's really close. I won't be surprised if the Cardinals end up winning this game. I think I'd lean towards the Dolphins, but this 4-point spread feels right. Falcons versus Bucks. All right, we got 3 more early window games, 4 more early window games still. We got the Eagles, Bengals, Falcons, Bucks, Pats, Jets, Colts, Texans. And then we got to talk through the Cowboys, 49ers, Giants, Steelers, and that's it. The 2 primetime games. We've already talked about the late window games. We went to the Commanders, Bears. We talked through that. I don't think Jane Daniels is a guy you want to start in fantasy. Talked about the Panthers, Broncos already. Talked about the Chiefs, Raiders already. We got the Kermit the Frog revenge game here for Pat Mahomes. Probably his first game over 20 fantasy points this week. We got the Saints, Chargers. Talked through that one already. Yeah, so we got just a few more games left here. All right, so let's go to the Buccaneers Falcons game. This is a rematch that we've already seen. A bunch of rematches actually this week that we've already seen. This one of the more exciting ones. I mean, this Falcons Bucks game we saw. I think it was a Thursday night game when we saw this just a few weeks ago. If I pull this up, if you're watching live on TikTok, by the way, guys, come to the YouTube Live. YouTube Live is a better viewing experience. I can share screen on the YouTube Live. You get all the same info, but we're looking at Baker Mayfield's game logs right now as we talk through the Bucks Falcons game. Baker, by the way, he's having a season. I mean, third in fantasy points per game. Hard to see that continuing with Mike Evans out, Godwin out for the season. But man, what a season so far for Baker Mayfield. Got to give some respect to him. He's 3rd in completion percentage. He's 2nd in passing touchdowns, 5th in passing yards. And last time he played the Falcons, he had 23.4 fantasy points. He had 3 passing touchdowns. He only had 180 passing yards, though. Hard to get super excited about Baker in this game. Rachaad White is a good PPR option. Let me pull this up here. I'll get to this one. We just talked about the Dolphins, talking about the Bucks now, and we'll get to the Falcons next. Rachaad White was the running back 2 last week, guys. He had 6 catches for 71 yards and 2 touchdowns. He doesn't even need to get carries. He's going to get targets. There's no Chris Godwin. There's no Mike Evans. He's the preferred receiving back, clearly. He had a 13% target share last week. That was it. They threw it a lot. But Rachaad White should get a lot of targets in this game. Definitely a startable guy in PPR. He projects as a running back 24. Why is Mahomes above Tua? Because we got the Kermit the Frog revenge game from Mahomes. And also, I mean, there's just risk with Tua in his first game back. You know, you got to expect them to lean a little bit towards the run in this game. I almost always prefer to, guys first games back, guys coming off injuries. There's just additional risk there that I think you can typically try to avoid. What's going on here? Here we go. Go to the receiver ranks here. So Jalen McMillan is the receiver I'm most intrigued about in this game. Cade Otton is definitely startable too. I'd play Cade Otton over a couple of the tight ends we were just looking at. I'd play him over Kincaid. I'd play him over Mark Andrews. I'd play Cade Otton ahead of Cole Kmet, ahead of Jake Ferguson, Hunter Henry, Isaiah Likely, Jatavion Sanders, Tucker Kraft, who I like. Cade Otton really should see good volume. Cade Otton really stepped up after the injuries in the game against the Ravens. Obviously, Godwin's injury was late, but after the Evans injury, he had 8 catches, 100 yards last week. No touchdowns, top 5 tight end. He only has 1 touchdown this season. I mean, his touchdown numbers are almost definitely going to go up. The usage has been great for K. Dot. He ranks first in snaps, first in snap percentage. He's run the 3rd most routes among tight ends. And there's real reason to expect a consistent target share now for Otten. He might be a top 8 tight end rest of the season now. So yeah, K. Dot's a good start for sure this week. Jalen McMillan, though, is the receiver I'm most excited about. A little bit more of the unknown upside here for Jalen McMillan. We've seen not much from him this season. He battled with some injuries. He was making noise in the preseason, did score in his first NFL game on his first NFL catch in week 1 versus the Commanders. But he's the guy that I think has the highest ceiling among these receivers. He had an 18% target share last week, 8 targets, didn't do much with them, 3 catches, 15 yards. But he did see a fourth of the team's air yards, was targeted on 29%, over 29% of his routes, which is pretty strong. And Baker's looked great this season. I think he's the clear sort of replacement for Evans / Godwin. Trey Palmer, we kind of know he's not this massive ceiling guy. We kind of know that for Sterling Shepard too. Just a little bit of this unknown upside for the rookie Jalen McMillan. I think he's an interesting high upside flex option in this game and moving forward. Bucky Irving, really not a guy I feel great starting. He was questionable for this game with a toe injury. He's going to play through it, but he's losing receiving work to Rachaad White. He's losing rushing work to Sean Tucker. He did actually run 18 routes last week and had 3 targets. Back-to-back good games for Bucky. He scored a touchdown last week too, but only had 23 rushing yards. He was at 2.6 yards per carry versus the Ravens, dealing with a toe injury. I'd prefer to bench Bucky Irving if I can. All right, let's get to the Falcons side of this ball. So the Bucs, they're 2.5-point underdogs without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin, at home versus the Falcons. I like the Falcons in this game to cover this 2.5-point spread. The last time we saw the Falcons play the Bucs, they were not stopped in the passing game. And I think that's going to continue right into this game. Drake London had 33.4 points. He was the wide receiver 2 that week. Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 yards. He was the quarterback 1 that week. He threw for 509 yards and 4 touchdowns just 3 weeks ago versus the Buccaneers. Kirk Cousins is a good start this week. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks you could argue Kirk Cousins over this week. I'm starting him over Stroud, over Geno. I've started him over Bo Nix, over Mahomes, over Kyler. I think there's a real argument to start Kirk Cousins over Caleb Williams. I think there's a real argument to start Kirk Cousins over Dak, over Purdy, over Burrow. I don't think I'd start him over Love, but there's a real argument for Kirk over all those guys. I personally would go Burrow, Purdy, Dak, Caleb, then Kirk, but they're all in a similar tier for me. Bijan Robinson's a must start. He's coming off 2 games over 23 fantasy points, top 10 running back in each of his last 2 games. He didn't do great versus the Buccaneers last time, but he's a bit healthier this time, and they're bigger favorites this time with the Buccaneers injuries. Darnell Mooney is also a must start. I really think he's in the must start category. He was in a must start category for me last week, Darnell Mooney, and he disappointed a bit. But part of the reason Darnell Mooney is a must start, he actually has a really strong floor, and we saw it last week. Down game for him, still almost had 10 PPR points. That's a real floor in fantasy football. He's out there every single snap. This is an extremely consolidated offense. It's Mooney, it's London, it's Pitts, and it's Bijan. And then Ray McLeod mixes in too. And there's basically no other names. I mean, Algier obviously mixes in a bit, but then there's the next guy is like under, a touch per game. I mean, there's no one else playing on this team. He's over a 17% target share every single week since week 2. Darnell Mooney hit 22% last week. And again, look at this game versus the Bucs. 9 catches, 105 yards, 2 TDs. Both London and Mooney were top 5 receivers last time versus the Bucs. Both need to be started this week. You got to start them. Kyle Pitts, he's heating up. He's heating up, guys. Kyle Pitts is heating up. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1. But he has 3 straight games over 10 points. He has 3 straight games with at least 65 receiving yards. He's definitely an intriguing piece of this passing game too. All right, let's get to this question here from Joey. Happy Sunday to you as well. Mooney or Waddle this week? Yeah, it's Mooney, I think, over Waddle. It's close. It's definitely close. I prefer Mooney over Waddle with what we saw from Mooney against this defense last time. I definitely think Waddle could pick it up with Tua. The only game we've seen with Waddle and Tua was against the Jags, though. A different matchup here than versus the Cardinals. I lean Mooney. Just a little bit more certainty, I think, with Darnell Mooney. Otten or Pitts, full PPR. Yeah, that one's super close. I think I had Pitts 1 spot ahead of Otten. So yeah, I think it's Mooney and Pitts. You want pieces of this pass game for the Falcons. Pickleballer saying Hawk Tua. All right, let's get to the tight ends here. I'll go to the tight end ranks here. I got Pitts one spot ahead of Odd, and they're in the same tier for me. They're the start of tier 3. Tier 1 is Bowers. That's it. End of tier. Then it's Kittle, Njoku, Kelsey, Ingram, McBride, all in tier 2. Then at the top of tier 3, I got Pitts, K. Dotton, Andrews, Kincaid, Kraft, Ferguson, and Hunter Henry. Those are the guys I really think are the decent starts for fantasy. All right, so I think the Falcons win that game by more than 2.5. Their pass game has success. I'm definitely intrigued about how Baker looks. Again, he's QB3 in points per game this season, but without his receivers, how does he look? All right, 3 more games to get through before we get to the primetime games. Then we're going to grind through the start-sits rest of live stream. Shout out to everybody in this live right now, by the way. Smash the like button. Hit the subscribe button. If you're watching live on YouTube, if you're watching live on TikTok, guys, smash the follow button. We are 8 weeks in, and we got another 8 weeks to go, man. I love these live streams every Sunday morning. So much to talk through. So much good things happening across the NFL and so many difficult decisions in fantasy. I think this week we're going to get to a lot of those in the start this coming up. All right, let's get to the Bengals and Eagles game. Really interesting thing going on for the Bengals side of the ball. Seems like T. Higgins is not going to play. Last night, at least, it sounded like he wasn't going to play. This morning, a little bit more optimism that T. Higgins is going to play. He's dealing with a hamstring, which is about as murky as it can get. A quad injury. He's feeling better, is the report, an hour ago, but they want him to test it out pregame. They don't want to risk a long-term injury. Guys, T. Higgins has been balling. This is a really big injury to watch. T. Higgins has out-targeted Jamar Chase, guys, over the last month. T. Higgins has had over a 30% target share in back-to-back games. I mean, I think what T. Higgins has been doing in terms of just the raw target numbers has been pretty overlooked. Not getting enough attention here. I mean, he's been the wide receiver 1 on this team alongside Jamar Chase, and he might not play today. And I think if he does play today, you kind of have to bench him. Like, you kind of have to. I have T. Higgins on the must-bench category. I think he's a must-bench, even if he plays. I mean, this is the same thing we were talking about with Mike Evans last week. It's a little bit different because T. Higgins isn't over 30 years old. You know, he's in the prime of his career. This would be a great spot for Higgins in a potential shootout versus the Eagles. This game has one of the highest over-unders of the week. The Bengals are only 2.5-point favorites at home in this game. Projected to be a very close game. And again, he's been over a 30% target share in 4 straight games. With all that uncertainty for T. Higgins, though, Jamar Chase ranks as wide receiver 1 in projections. I mean, he's going to go over 30% target share. If this ends up coming to fruition and T. Higgins is not at full steam or he misses the game, pretty much lock in Jamar Chase for a second game over 30% target share. Last time Jamar Chase went over 30% target share this season, he scored 41 points. He had 10 catches, 193 yards, and 2 TDs. So yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase has just an insane ceiling in this game. Joe Burrow, still, I think, a decent start in this game that should be high scoring. These are the types of games we see Joe Burrow show up for. He's been a top 12 QB in most games this season from a fantasy football perspective. So yeah, I like Joe Burrow this week, even with the T. Higgins stuff. I prefer Chase Brown over Zach Moss. I think Zach Moss is actually borderline must bench in this game. Don't see him having much success here versus the Eagles. Yoshabas is the other big gainer from T. Higgins' injury. If he doesn't play or if he's limited, Yoshabas had 0 last week. I think, yeah, he did play. He had a target. He played 70% of snaps, didn't even have a single target. I mean, just not nearly the same ceiling for Yoshabas, obviously, as T. Higgins. But he's the next up on this team if T. Higgins is not at full steam. Definitely playing Hurts over Tua, seeing that one in the TikTok live. We're about to get to the start-sit section of this game. Let's go up to the Eagles, though, who I think the Eagles will win this game. The Eagles are 2.5-point underdogs on the road. The Eagles have really struggled this season. I think they're still the only team without a point or something, a touchdown. It's either a touchdown or a point. Someone in the comments, Eagles fans, let me know. Is it a touchdown that you haven't scored in the first quarter, or is it literally not a single point? Because every broadcast, every single week for the Eagles, they're like, yep, Eagles still unable to score points in the first quarter. I mean, it's pretty crazy stuff. They get the Bengals today, though. The Bengals ranked bottom 5 versus quarterbacks this season. They're allowing 18.6 fantasy points per game. Lamar and Jaden Daniels both went over 25 fantasy points versus them. The 2 true rushing QBs they played smashed against the Bengals. I think we see something similar for Jalen Hurts today. Has to be started. The only QB I'm starting ahead of Jalen Hurts is Lamar. MVP Lamar Jackson. Saquon Barkley obviously has to be started. He's a top 5 running back option. Coming off the revenge game versus the Giants, that was obviously going to be a smash. Should do well versus the Bengals too, even though the Bengals ranked top 10 versus running backs this season. A.J. Brown has yet to miss. A.J. Brown's 3 for 3. He's yet to miss. I mean, he is unstoppable regardless of the game script, regardless of the matchup, regardless of the situation. Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown are going to find a way to have a huge game. We have not seen AJ Brown go under 85 yards this season. He has a touchdown in every single game. He's only played 3 games, but this is a really good spot again for him versus the Bengals. He's over a 34% target share in all 3 games. I mean, these target share numbers are wild. He ranks first in percentage of his team's air yards. He ranks second in target share this season. He ranks first in fantasy points per game. Again, small sample size. He's only played 3 games, but this is not really a true small sample size for AJ Brown. We've seen this over a long stretch of time for AJ Brown. Obviously a must start. Devontae Smith, coming off a down game, still a good start in this game. Devontae Smith had less than a point last week. 1 catch, -2 yards. I mean, brutal stuff. Brutal stuff. If you were in a non-PPR league, he had negative points. Still have some faith in Devontae Smith, though. We've seen it over a long stretch of time with him, too. Just the fact that we have seen long stretches of time where Devontae Smith is rivaling AJ Brown in terms of targets and yards. And we know what AJ Brown is. I mean, Devontae Smith still a back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, still borderline must start, very good start still in this game. I do not shy away from Devontae Smith off his last week. I think Devontae Smith, one of the more obvious buy lows in fantasy with a pretty good schedule, rest of season, coming off a game under a point. All right, let's hop to the receiver ranks here again on the TikTok and YouTube lives. We're on live on TikTok and YouTube right now, by the way, guys. The YouTube live is the better viewing experience. Nothing against people who want to watch on TikTok. I appreciate you as well. But I like to let everyone know I can share screen on the YouTube live. I can pull up comments on the YouTube live. So it's just a better viewing experience. Like we're looking at Devontae Smith's game logs right now on the YouTube live. Link is right in the TikTok box if you want to come watch on YouTube. All right, so I think the Eagles win this game. They're 2.5-point underdogs. T. Higgins is definitely a big injury to watch, though, leading up to game time. We should get more about that during this live stream. All right, 2 more games to get to. Pats, Jets, Texans, Colts. Then we'll get to the 2 primetime games. Then we will grind through start sits for basically the rest of the live stream. I'll hit on the 3 free player props I got today, too. Already, I think, touched on a couple of those guys. All right, so the Patriots at home, 7-point underdogs. Another big underdog this week here for the Pats against the Jets. There is so much pressure on the Jets in this game. I mean, they've done so much to build around Aaron Rodgers. They went and got Devontae Adams. They fired their coach. They're 7-point favorites in this game. The Patriots have been terrible. All the pressure on the Jets in this game. The Patriots have not lost both games to the Jets in a season since I think before the year 2000. I mean, I saw it this week. Let's see here. I don't think I'm going to find this easily, but it's been a long time since the Jets won both games versus the Patriots. I do think the Jets win this game. Drake May, not a good start this week. He was a good start last week, but he got the Jags last week. Hunter Henry is really the only player on the Pats. I think that is like a decent start in this game. Jets have been okay versus tight ends, but he had some really good usage last week. 25% target share, 103 air yards for Hunter Henry with Drake May. Under center last week, 8 catches, 92 yards. Demario Douglas is a guy that he's one of the toughest start sits, I think, of the week, honestly. Because last week, Demario Douglas was a great start. I mean, on paper, he was a fantastic option, right? He had back-to-back games, seeing significant target shares. He had seen, heading into the game last week, he had seen over a 28% target share in 3 of his last 4 games. And then he got the Jags. They rank bottom 3 versus receivers. So, of course, we're going to start Demario Douglas. And then this very weird scenario that happened with multiple players last week, happened with Deebo Samuel, it happened with Demario Douglas, where he had an illness that was unreported. I do not understand how some of these things are going unreported. I mean, there's clearly, different incentives for the teams and for the fans in terms of understanding all the information about these injuries. Clearly, the teams do not want to be honest about the injuries. We saw that a little bit with Puka on Thursday night, too. But Demario Douglas dealing with an illness that they knew about before the game. It comes up during the game, and he ends up not playing basically the entire second half. He played 1 snap in the second half. Actually, all of his production, Demario Douglas, last game, came in the first drive. He had 2 catches, 14 yards on 3 targets in the first drive. And then he did nothing the rest of the game because he was dealing with an illness and barely played. I mean, guys, he only played 20 snaps. 33% snap share. So, Douglas maybe is an okay option if he's back to full steam, but not a guy you can really feel good starting against the Jets. Ramondre Stevenson, I really don't want to start him either. I mean, he's really, really struggled. He's been under 10 points now in 4 of his last 5 games. One of those games he missed, we won't count that against him. So 3 of his last 4 games. But he's losing receiving work to the other 2 running backs. JaMychal Hasty has been the most efficient running back in his backfield for 2 straight games. Both Stevenson and Douglas have really struggled behind a really bad offensive line. None of these guys are must starts for the Pats. That's the TLDR. And then the Jets. Breece Hall ranks as running back 1 this week. I mean, he's going to smash, guys. Breece Hall, the role that Breece Hall is in ever since the coaching change is massive. Breece Hall, over an 82% snap share, back-to-back games. He's seeing over 80% of the carries on this backfield, and he's seeing 16+% target shares. I mean, the usage for Breece Hall is arguably the best role in the NFL for one of the best players in the NFL. He had 26.1 points versus a good Steelers defense last week. Now he gets the Pats. The Pats have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game to running backs this season, 28 fantasy points per game to running backs. Tank Bigsby just smashed against them. Joe Mixon smashed the week before that. Both those guys went over 23 points. I mean, Breece Hall could easily clear 30 points in this game. Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, both wide receiver 2s. They're wide receiver 2s. I think pretty clearly. Happy Sunday. If Zay plays, him or Devontae, yeah, it's Devontae for sure. I think pretty clearly Devontae Adams coming to the Jets is bad for Garrett Wilson for fantasy football. I think we saw that play out a bit in the first game already. You know, a lot of people pushed back on the live stream I did on that Tuesday night when that happened. Now, I go live every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Sunday morning. Tuesday, we recap all the games, everything we learned. And clearly, Devontae Adams stealing target share away from Garrett Wilson is not good for him. Clearly, Devontae Adams stealing end zone targets and red zone targets away from Garrett Wilson is not good for him. The benefit for Garrett Wilson is less attention from defenses and more open looks. And we saw that a little bit in their first game together too, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to offset the less targets and the less touchdowns he's going to have. Both guys still wide receiver 2s. Both guys still very good for fantasy. I do prefer Garrett Wilson just slightly over Devontae Adams, but man, it's close. And man, I would not be shocked if Devontae Adams ends up just overtaking Garrett Wilson as the primary go-to guy in this offense, given the connection he has with Aaron Rodgers. Both guys definitely still startable though versus the Pats. So we're starting Breece Hall 100%. He's the running back 1 this week. We're starting Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams in a lot of spots too. I expect some tough start sits with those guys. Personally, I would lean Garrett over Adams, but it's super close. Wide receiver 15 and wide receiver 18 in my ranks. B-Rob or JSN at flex. Yeah, we talked about both those guys. I think I'd probably lean towards JSN, but it's close. We're not at the start sit section yet. We got 3 more games to get to. All right, let's get to the Colts. I think, by the way, the Jets do win that game, but man, so much pressure on the Jets. If they lose, I mean, they're in a really dire situation as an NFL team. All right, the Colts. Anthony Richardson. JT is going to be back this week. A-Rich, we have not seen have a good game since week 1 against this same team that he's playing this week against the Texans. The Colts are 5-point underdogs in Houston today. I wouldn't be surprised to see a better fantasy day from A-Rich in this game. Probably not what we saw in week 1 with the 27 fantasy points, but could he go over 20? For sure. He's really struggled passing the ball, though, guys. He's not had a game over 215 passing yards this season. His completion percentage, guys, I mean, look at this. If you're watching live on YouTube, again, if you're watching live on TikTok, guys, I'm telling you, the YouTube Live is a better viewing experience. Link is right in the TikTok bio. You're 2 presses your finger away from the YouTube Live. We're looking at Anthony Richardson's game logs and his averages this season. Anthony Richardson's completion percentage is 48.5%. That ranks 38th in the NFL. Guys, there's only 32 teams. I mean, there's more than 32 quarterbacks that have played, obviously. Basically, every single quarterback you've seen play this season has a better completion percentage than Anthony Richardson. You know, he doesn't need to complete a lot of passes to have a good fantasy game like we saw in week 1. He had 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown in week 1. This game's projected to be kind of close. Pittman, Downs, they're both playing. Both good to go. Pittman, you know, really weird situation for Pittman. I mean, one of these receivers is probably going to outdo this projection here. Downs and Pittman both projected to be outside the top 35 of their positions. Let me switch back to the receivers here. I'll switch over to the running backs on the YouTube Live too. I know I've been on the receivers a bit. But Pittman and Downs, I mean, Pittman is the guy I'm most concerned about on this of the two because he's dealing with a back injury that they said might put him on IR. And then he didn't go on IR. So he's clearly injured. He's playing through a very real back injury. We haven't seen a huge ceiling from him this season. I mean, he was the guy you wanted before the season. I still think there was a ceiling there if he's close to full health. I mean, we saw a 23% target share last week, only 9.3 points, 3 catches, 63 yards. it's tough to rely on these receivers if Anthony Richardson's not going to complete, more than half his passes. Like these target shares, not all target shares are created equal, guys. Not all targets are created equal. If half your targets are hitting the floor, then that could be really misleading. 23.6% target share for Pittman, but if half those targets aren't catchable, it doesn't really matter. Pittman only has 2 games over 4 catches. Neither of those were with Anthony Richardson. So I think you kind of have to bench Pittman, even in a good matchup here, even in a game where they should be trailing. But he does still have a ceiling. I will give you that if you want to start Michael Pittman. Josh Downs, I think, has a little bit better of a floor, though we saw a really low floor last week. 1 catch, 3 yards for Josh Downs. Easily his worst game of the season. He has not been nearly as good with Anthony Richardson as he was with Joe Flacco. He was balling with Joe Flacco. Downs was a must-start wide receiver with Joe Flacco. He had 3 straight games as a top 20 receiver. 3 straight games with at least 7 catches. I feel a little bit better about his floor versus Pittman. One of these 2 guys I think will outperform this projection. The other one's probably going to disappoint. Want nothing to do with Alec Pierce. JT's back, and JT projects worse than I would have expected. Tough matchup here versus the Texans. What does JT's workload look like in his first game back? That's the real question. And you guys understand, if you've been following me for long enough or been tuned in to this live for long enough, I generally lean against guys coming back from injury in their first game if I can, because there's just a lot of uncertainty in what those roles are going to look like. All right. On the other side of this game, the Texans, who I do think will ultimately win this game. I'm still believing in Tank Dell. I still think Tank Dell's a pretty good start this week. I get that he had a donut last week. It's very difficult to bounce back and have confidence in a guy when he had 0 points last week. But the underlying numbers for Tank Dell weren't that bad. He still had a 21% target share, still saw almost a third of the total air yards for the offense. He just didn't catch the targets that went his way last week. It was a bad game, but I still think he's got a pretty good floor ceiling combo in this game without Nico Collins. There's still no Nico. That makes Steph Diggs and Tank Dell borderline must starts. Mixon is an absolute must start. He's the only running back that comes close to Breece Hall. I mean, arguably the tier at the top this week, it's Breece and Mixon, end of tier 1. It's those 2 guys. Mixon is the A.J. Brown of running backs this season. He's 3 for 3. I mean, it's the same 3 games, too. You look at the A.J. Brown game logs, you look at the Joe Mixon game logs, and you just picture that Spider-Man meme of the 2 guys pointing at each other. They're 3 for 3. Neither of them has had a bad game. Joe Mixon has not gone under 100 rushing yards in a game this season. But he's only played 3 games. He gets another good matchup here versus the Colts. And guys, week 1 versus the Colts, Joe Mixon, 159 rushing yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 19 yards there. 2, he played 72% of the snaps. The snap share has risen back-to-back games. 25 carries last week for 76% rush share. 16% target share, which is most of the season. I mean, he does not have a game, guys, under 26 fantasy points. I mean, wild production so far from Joe Mixon. You got to be starting Joe Mixon. And yeah, I really think Joe Mixon does well in this game. I like Tank Dell and Diggs in this game as well. I think Schultz is a fine option, not a great option. He only had 3.8 last week, only 1 catch last week. He's clearly getting a little bit more involved without Nico, but it's really Diggs, it's Dell, and it's Mixon. And then Stroud's a back-end QB1. There's a bunch of QBs I'd rather start than Stroud, though. All right, we got the 2 primetime games, and then we will get to the free player props, the DraftKings lineup, and then we will grind through start sits for the next several hours. We got a few hours left still in this live stream. We're really just getting started. All right, so let's go to the Cowboys 49ers game. So I really think Dak is a must start this week. I really think Dak is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in fantasy football right now. One of the things that is going underrated, I think, with Dak Prescott is the schedule he's had so far this season. He's only had 1 good matchup this season. He's had 1 great matchup this season. He's had 1 okay matchup, and then 4 matchups for his top 12 defenses. The Browns rank 5th best versus quarterbacks. The Saints rank 11th best. The Steelers rank 6th best. The Lions rank 9th best. He didn't do good against any of these defenses. I mean, he did okay versus the Steelers, 352 yards and 2 TDs. The 1 great matchup he had, though, against the Ravens, he scored 30 points, was QB2. And we know there's a ceiling here for Dak to go over 50 passing attempts. There's not very many quarterbacks in the NFL with a ceiling to go over 50 passing attempts. Let me switch to the QB ranks here. And Dak has that. And he has it this week, too. Tough. It's not a great matchup here versus the 49ers. But this is the 2nd best matchup of the season, guys, for Dak Prescott. And this is also one of the most difficult matchups he has rest of season. Dak Prescott has arguably the best quarterback schedule rest of season. He has an amazing schedule in the fantasy football playoffs too, which is part of the reason I'm very in on him rest of season. You don't need to start him this week necessarily to see the value of that. But this game's projected to be very high scoring, 47-point over-under, one of the highest of the week. Cowboys are 5-point underdogs. They should be trailing, should be having to throw a lot. Part of the reason Dak can hit this 50-plus pass attempt volume is they have no run game. There's just no world where the Cowboys really are able to lean on the run. I mean, Dalvin Cook's going to be active supposedly this week. I don't think that's going to be a game changer for the rushing attack for the Cowboys. So yeah, I think Dak Prescott's got a pretty good ceiling in this game. Playing as an underdog in San Francisco, 5-point underdog in this game. And they're coming out of the bye too, which is obviously a big benefit for Dak and the Cowboys offense. I think we probably see CeeDee Lamb's best game of the season. I feel like I've been saying that almost every single week, but it's been true almost every single week. It's only a matter of time until we see the true best game of the season from Lamb. I mean, we have not seen Lamb go over 100 yards yet this season, guys. He was doing that frequently last season. I think if I go back to 2023 here in the Walter Picks app and the game logs, by the way, if you guys are watching live on YouTube, this is the Walter Picks app out on screen. You can do all of this for free in the app. It's in the YouTube description. If you're watching live on TikTok, come to the YouTube live. I'm sharing screens of the game logs of CeeDee Lamb right now, who, by the way, CeeDee Lamb ranked number 1 in fantasy points per game among receivers last season. He averaged over 100 yards per game last season, and he's at 78 yards per game this season. No games over 100 yards yet. The matchups haven't been terrible for Lamb, but they get even better, really, rest of season. And even in that one great matchup that Dak played well, he didn't do much. But yeah, obviously we're starting Lamb. I think we should start Dak. I think Tolbert's an interesting flex option. I don't want anything to do with Dowdle or really anyone else in this offense. Jake Ferguson, back end tight end 1. He's startable. Not a must start, but startable. I think the 49ers probably end up winning that game. And on the 49ers side of the ball, Jordan Mason is a must start, absolute must start. Debo or Shakir. Yeah, I'm going Debo. I think Debo needs to be started. And there was a question mark if Debo was going to play or not. Expected to play today, was reported just a couple of hours ago from Adam Schefter, dealing with wrist and illness. He was wrist injury and an illness. The illness was the thing that I think kept him out of the game last week, though. And Ayuka the Bazooka, Brandon Ayuk, he's out for the season. This is massive for Deebo Samuel. It's big for George Kittle, and it's big for McCaffrey, too, when McCaffrey comes back. But any games where you get Deebo Samuel without Brandon Ayuk, he's going to project as a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, and he's going to have massive, massive ceiling. Deebo Samuel has one of the biggest ceilings, guys, of all receivers in the NFL. Go back to last season's game logs. He had back-to-back games here over 34 fantasy points in weeks 13 and 14 last season. He has a ceiling where he can score rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns. The Cowboys have really struggled versus the run. That's why you got to start Jordan Mason. They ranked 3rd worst versus running backs this season. That is good for Deebo Samuel, too. George Kittle's a must start. He is the tight end 1 so far this season. I mean, it's not actually that close. It's really not close. George Kittle is number 1 among tight ends, 16.9 fantasy points per game. He has the 2nd most receptions, 2nd most yards per game, but he ranks 1st in touchdowns. He's only 2nd in receptions and yards to Brock Bowers, who has not scored many touchdowns. I don't know if Brock Bowers even has a touchdown yet this season still. Not the best matchup versus the Cowboys, but yeah, Kittle's a must start. Debo's a must start. I think Purdy's a fine start too, with some of his weapons as must starts. And Ricky Pearsall, definitely an interesting flex option. Ricky Pearsall, similar to Rome Odunze. I talked about earlier in the live, talking about the Bears. I think Rome Odunze is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL right now. Nobody's really thinking about Rome Odunze as this great receiver, but he really is. He really does have the potential to be one of the really good receivers for fantasy rest of the season and just in the NFL in general. Getting a little bit overshadowed with all the different weapons there, but he has a great schedule rest of the season. And Odunze still has a really high ceiling. And Ricky Pearsall is right in that category with him. He wasn't in the same category of prospect as Rome Odunze was, but Ricky Pearsall was a 1st-round pick. Ricky Pearsall has really good after-the-catch abilities. He played 76% of snaps last week in his first game. He's going to play near 100% of snaps in this game. He's going to have a big role without Brandon Ayuk. Definitely an interesting flex option. Definitely a guy to watch really closely. He should not be available in any leagues at this point. Sounds like, by the way, Christian McCaffrey's going to be back in week 10. A couple more weeks for the Christian McCaffrey people until Christian McCaffrey starts winning leagues. All right, I think the 49ers win this game, by the way. They're 5-point favorites. I think they probably beat that spread, but I do like Dak and the passing game for the Cowboys as well, both Dak and Lamb. All right, the last game is the Giants versus Steelers, an ugly one here. Malik Neighbors is still a must start. I know Malik Neighbors had a down game last week. Still a must start. Still projects as a top 10 wide receiver. We haven't seen Malik Neighbors go over 22 points, go over 20 points. We haven't seen Malik Neighbors go over 10 points since week 4, but he missed 2 games with the concussion. Last week was just a down week for him where the Giants were sacked so many times. And you got to be worried about that versus the Steelers too, but I still think you got to start Neighbors. I'll go to the receivers here, seeing that request in the TikTok live. Let's switch back to the receivers here in the YouTube live too. But yeah, you gotta be starting Malik Neighbors, guys. I share the same concerns as other people about the Giants offense just being able to sustain with the amount of pressure that Daniel Jones is under. He got sacked 7 times versus the Eagles, and man, not great against the Steelers. The Steelers have had a sack in every single game, multiple sacks in many of these games, at least 2 sacks, actually, I think, in every single game. I don't think he's going to get sacked 7 times again, but definitely a real concern for his offense being sustainable. I still think, regardless, Neighbors just needs to be started. Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't think he's a must start. He's a floor play. All season, he's been a floor play. He's going to get at least 5 catches every single game. He's seeing very consistent target shares. He's the 9th highest target share in the NFL, guys. Wan'Dale Robinson, guys, has the 4th most targets in the NFL. I mean, crazy stuff. 4th most targets in the NFL, but he ranks 29th in fantasy points. Only has 2 touchdowns. That's what Wan'Dale is. He's just a floor PPR play. I would go Tracy over Singletary, but they're both going to be active, both going to play in this game. They're saying the 3rd running back might get some work too, Eric Gray. I mean, you can't really trust any of these guys for fantasy because of that in a tough matchup versus the Steelers. But if I had to choose, I'm going Tyrone Tracy for sure. He's looked like the best running back on the team so far this season. I think he is the higher upside option, but really all of them have a low floor. Does sound like Kittle's going to play, yes. Just talked about that 49ers game. Does sound like both Kittle and Debo are going to play tonight. On the Steelers side of the ball, I don't really want to start Russell Wilson. He looked good in his first game. He had 24.9 fantasy points versus the Jets. QB3. 264 yards, 2 TDs. He also ended up getting a QB sneak touchdown. Kind of boosted his fantasy point total a bit there. Giants are an average matchup. Russ is not a must bench. I think I saw someone say Russ versus Jaden Daniels earlier in the live. I think I would go Russ in that situation. I don't really think you can start Jaden Daniels, who just almost definitely isn't going to be able to run as much. As it stands right now, this is 35 minutes ago, does not look good for Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins and his chance to play today versus Eagles after suffering a quad injury in practice on Friday. What is with these Friday injuries, man? I mean, there's been so many of them, I feel like, this season. Brutal stuff. We got Friday injuries. We got pregame warm-up injuries with Evan Ingram. You hate to see it. As always, a lot of injuries. Kittle is expected to play today, yes. And T. Higgins is on the wrong side of questionable right now, after having 4 straight games over 30% target share. Sticking with this game really quickly for the Giants and the Steelers, I do like the Steelers in this game. They're 6-point favorites at home. I think they probably should be favored by closer to 7 or 8. George Pickens is a must start. He really is a must start. George Pickens, guys, is a very talented receiver who has just not been in the best situation most of this season. He ranks 2.8 yards per route run. That ranks his wide receiver 11. His target share is the 6th highest in the NFL. And we finally saw what it looks like when we have a quarterback that matches George Pickens' skill set. He had 22 points last week, wide receiver 4. 5 catches, 111 yards, and a TD. He had a 33% target share. The air yards, he ranks top 10 in air yards. He's 3rd highest in the percentage of his team's air yards. Guys, George Pickens accounts for 50% of the air yards for the Steelers. There's nobody else on the Steelers to throw the ball to. I mean, it really is Pickens. We talked about it before the season of the gap between the number 1 receiver and the next best receiver on some teams. And I thought heading into the season, it was the Giants. I thought it was the gap between Neighbors and then Wan'Dale and Slayton was massive. But I actually think it might have been the Steelers. I mean, the gap between George Pickens and Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin. I mean, the gap is insane there. I mean, it really is astronomical. And I don't think Pickens is quite as good as Neighbors, but I mean, maybe isn't as far away as people realize. So yeah, you got to start George Pickens. Najee Harris is a fine start. I really don't want to start Jaylen Warren in this game. We haven't seen Jaylen Warren score more than 10 points once this season. He did get some catches last week. He had 3 targets. He caught 2 of those for 15 yards. He played over 50% of the snaps the first time this whole season last week. So definitely a trend to monitor there. He ran a bunch of routes. He only had 12 carries and he was inefficient, 3.7 yards per carry. His second best game of the season the last week was 7.9. I still don't really want to start him. And I think Najee's the much better bet for a touchdown. All right, that's every game. We talk through every single game. What I think is going to happen in the game, the guys I'm starting in those games, the guys I'm worried about in those games. Time to get to the free player props. Time to get to the DraftKings lineup, and then we are going to grind through start sits for the remainder of the live stream. I love this part of the live. A lot of tough start sits definitely to get through. All right. If you're watching live, is Debo going to play? Yes. Let me just quickly, before I get to the free player props, quick rundown for everyone just joining. We've been live for a little over an hour now. We're still just getting started, though. Quick rundown of the injury reports. Debo, Kittle are likely to play. Let me pull this up here. Debo and Kittle likely to play. T. Higgins and DK Metcalf are unlikely to play today. Both these guys are technically game time decisions, but T. Higgins and DK Metcalf probably not playing today. That's massive for when is sub only. Comes at the very end of the live, like another hour and a half-ish, and we'll get to the sub only chat. T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, both unlikely to play. Massive for Jamar Chase. Big for Yoshavas on the Bengals too. Really big for JSN and Lockett for the Seahawks with Metcalf not playing. Sounds like Jaden Daniels is going to play, but I'm still very hesitant to start him in fantasy. I think he still has some upside, of course. He's still been a really effective passer this season, but he's definitely much riskier. Definitely much riskier. He's probably not going to run as much. All the guy, and also Travis Etienne, he's out. He's not playing. So Bigsby is definitely startable. Tajay Spears also out. The guys that were injured but expected to play, Debo Samuel's going to play. George Kittle's going to play. Tyreek Hill, Tua are going to play. Zay Flowers is likely going to play, but he's still, I think, a true game time decision. Ladd McConkey's going to play. Bucky Irving's going to play. Jacoby Myers is going to play, and Dalvin Cook is going to play. That's the quick injury report update. Cordero Patterson's out too. He's barely played this season. All right, let's get to the free player props, and then we will go to the DraftKings lineup. Then I got you guys with the start sits. All right, let's go to the 3 free player props. So we are 20-11, guys. We are 20-11. We went 1 for 3 on Thursday night. Ty Chandler under reception was a great one, but really just missed both those running back props slightly on the Thursday night live. But we're 20-11. Feeling very good about where we're at with the free player props this season, and I got 3 more I like a lot today. Number 1, Jatavion Sanders over 2.5 receptions. And I'm scared to take the pass game props for Bryce Young, but guys, someone's got to catch passes on this offense, and it's going to be Jatavion Sanders. Tommy Tremble's unlikely to play again this week. Jatavion Sanders has 11 catches in his last 2 games. He had a 35% target share last week, and the Broncos locked down receivers. I mean, what are these receivers supposed to do? Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker. This is who the top receivers are for the Panthers today versus Pat Surtain. Jatavion Sanders is likely going to lead this team in targets, I think, today. 2.5 catches is just so low for a team that's going to be trailing in this game. They're 11-point underdogs in this game. So I like Jatavion Sanders over 2.5 receptions. I think I saw it at -130 this morning. Feels like very good odds there. Josh Jacobs over a touchdown. I think Jacobs keeps his touchdown streak going after last week scoring his first career receiving touchdown. He now has 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. He still only has 2 touchdowns, though, this whole season. I mean, he's due for more touchdowns, guys. He's the 9th most rushing yards in the game. He gets the Jags now. The Jaguars are allowing 0.7 rushing touchdowns per game and 0.4 receiving touchdowns per game to running backs. Over 1 touchdown per game allowed to running backs by the Jags this season. I mean, DeAndre Swift, Trey Sermon, Adar Gumbawale, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, James Cook, Devon Achane, all these guys scored touchdowns versus the Jags. I feel very good about JaMychal Hasty last week, scored a touchdown versus the Jags. Jacobs is going to score a touchdown today versus the Jags. I like the odds here too, about even odds I'm seeing in most places for Jacobs to score a touchdown. And then the third free player prop today is Kenneth Walker, over 91.5 total yards. This is a very good spot for Kenneth Walker. The Bills have been crushed by running backs this season. Guys, the Bills are allowing over 100 rushing yards per game to running backs and over 50 receiving yards per game to running backs. They're allowing almost 160 total yards per game to running backs this season. The Bills have been annihilated by the running backs. Kenneth Walker, meanwhile, his usage has looked great. I mean, his snap percentage was down a bit last week where Shard played a little bit more. He was battling through an injury, still had 14 carries, still had 2 targets. He was a bit inefficient in this game, but I think we see usage closer to week 6 and week 5 for Kenneth in this game versus the Bills. This game also was the Weatherman Sam report of the day. There's some wind projected in this game, 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts. There's heavy rain on and off throughout this game. I think that pushes more work towards the running backs. I think Kenneth has a great chance to go over 100 total yards today. So that is the 3 free player props of the day. Jatavion Sanders over 2.5 receptions, Jacobs over half a touchdown, and Kenneth Walker over 91.5 total yards. All right, I'll talk to the DraftKings lineup quick, and then we will get to the start sits for the next few hours. I'm going with the Jordan Love, Romeo Dobbs stack here versus the Jags. And I'm not bringing it back with any Jags players. If there's something I would tweak about this lineup, might be trying to find a Jags bring back here with Brian Thomas Jr. or Evan Ingram or maybe even Tank Bigsby. But I couldn't find a spot that I loved to put a Jags player in. I think the double stack's enough here with Jordan Love, Tucker Kraft, Romeo Dobbs, stacked versus the Jags. I'm going with Breece Hall and Joe Mixon. I'm getting the running back 1 and running back 2 in my ranks in this lineup. This is a big running back week, guys. The running backs, like the top 12 running backs, top 15 running backs. If you look at the top 20 players in terms of like just the flex options, I'll pull it up here on the YouTube Live. Guys, again, if you're watching live on TikTok, come to the YouTube Live. Link is right in the TikTok bio. Better viewing experience. I got the ranks, the flex ranks up on the screen right now. If you look at just like the top flex options, I mean, it's almost all running backs. AJ Brown, Tyreek, Drake London, Lamb, and Chase. These are the only receivers really cracking it. There's 9 different running backs and only 4 receivers in like the top 15 flex options. So I like getting the two top running back options. Really, I think Breece and Mixon, they're my only tier 1 running backs this week. And then there's a long list of tier 2 and tier 3 running backs. Calvin Ridley, I don't expect many people to be playing him. I do think he has an interesting ceiling. And then Cedric Tillman, I like him as a sleeper on DraftKings this week. He's pretty much min-priced, 3,300 on DraftKings this week. He had 8 catches last week. He gets the Ravens without both their starting corners, who the Ravens already were bad in the secondary. They already rank bottom 5 versus receivers this season, and they're without their top 2 corners. I think that bodes very well for Winston, Tillman, and Judy, but Tillman's just so cheap. And then Kareem Hunt, too. He ranks as a top 12 running back option versus the Raiders today. He's been over 20 carries back-to-back games. Raiders rank bottom 10 versus running backs. And then I'm going with the Bears defense versus an injured Jaden Daniels. That's the DraftKings lineup for me this week. Again, this is a tournament lineup. Definitely encourage you guys to tweak this lineup to make it your own as well. All right, we're going to get to the start sits now. Pumped to get to this portion of the live. Let me take a quick sip of coffee, look through some of these comments, and make sure we get to some of the better start sits. I'm going to get to as many start sits as I can. Why is Zay not in your top 50? Because he's injured. He's playing through an injury. When I made this top 50 for the receivers, let me switch to the receivers here. When I made the top 50 for the receivers, I thought there was a real chance Zay Flowers didn't even play. And it sounds like he's trending towards playing. But I think he's going to be playing through an injury. And he gets a tough matchup versus the Browns. That's why Zay Flowers is a must bench for me this week. Najee versus Amari. I think I'd probably go with Najee if you want the floor, and Amari if you want the ceiling. I think if I had to choose, I usually lean towards the ceiling. I'd probably go with Amari. All right, we got to get in the zone here for the start sit segment of this live. We're going to get to hundreds of start sits. One of the things I want in the future, by the way, I want to start sit counter. I want to start sit counter that counts how many start sits I answer on these lives, so I can try to beat my records from the past. And I also want an accuracy rating. Who wants to step up and volunteer for tracking all of that? All right, Kyle Pitts or Kate Otten? Kraft or Kate Otten? Tight end rankings. Yeah, let me go to the tight end ranks. Seeing a lot of tight end questions. Go to the tight end ranks here. We'll focus in on tight end start sits here for a moment. I think this actually might be a good way to do it because there's a lot of start sits. Realistically, I can't get to every single start sit. I'm going to get to a lot of the start sits though. I think if we focus in position by position, let's start with the tight ends first. We're going to go like 10 minutes of just tight end start sits. Then we'll go 10 minutes of just quarterback start sits. Then we'll go to the receivers and running backs, which obviously a lot of receiver versus running back start sit decisions there. So if you have tight end start sit decisions, guys, send them in the chat. Tight end start sits, send them in the chat. We got the tight end ranks up right now. We're gonna go really focus on the tight end start sits. So Kyle Pitts versus Kate Otten, really close. I got them back to back in the tight end ranks. They're both at the top of tier 3 for me. They project 0.2 points different. Kyle Pitts is heating up though, guys, and this is a good spot for the Falcons passing attack. Last time Kirk Cousins played against the Bucs, he threw for over 500 yards, and 88 of those yards went to Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts has still not scored a touchdown since week 1. I like Kate Otten too, though. I think it's Pitts over Otten, but it's close. Let's actually do this comparison on the YouTube Live real quick. They're both so close. Kate Otten has a slightly higher ceiling according to the Walter Picks app. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think they're really comparable options. 8 catches, 100 yards for Kate Otten last week. Kate Otten leads the NFL among tight ends in snaps. No tight ends played more snaps. than Cade Otton. I mean, he's not coming off the field. And there's no Mike Evans and no Chris Godwin. In terms of matchups, the Buccaneers have been a better matchup for tight ends than the Falcons have. I think Kyle Pitts just slightly better matchup for Pitts. I think they're in similar roles, similar opportunity this week. But yeah, I would go Kyle Pitts there. Kraft or Otton? Yeah, so I'm going Otton over Kraft. I do like Kraft versus the Jags too, but I think Otton's a better option. They're both in tier 3 for me, so it's definitely very close. I got Kraft in the DraftKings lineup. They're all within like 1 point projection. Andrews or Kraft? Yeah, so I got Andrews over Kraft too. And I like Andrews a little bit more because of the Zay Flowers injury. Tougher matchup for Andrews. The Andrews usage has still been really bad. He had a season high 19% target share last week, but he's still not even playing, 60% of the snaps. He ran 12 routes, guys, last week, Mark Andrews. But he had 4 targets on those routes. And he caught all 4 of them for 41 yards and 2 TDs. This matchup versus the Browns is tough. If you look at the matchups for tight ends versus the Browns, let's actually pull this up. I might change my opinion here on this one. Looking at this, they haven't played very good tight ends. They played Brock Bowers, the Browns. Brock Bowers had his worst game of the season, 2 catches, 19 yards. Jake Ferguson only had 3 catches. No tight end has more than 4 catches versus the Browns. Man, looking at that, I actually think I got to adjust these a little bit. I think I'm going to adjust these a little bit on the YouTube live where I can adjust them. I would go Kraft and Kincaid over Andrews. I would go Kraft over Andrews. I'd go Kincaid over Andrews. I'd put Andrews at the bottom of this tier 3, not in the middle like I have it now. Looking at these matchup data a little bit closer. And by the way, guys, if you followed me enough, I pride myself on not having take lock. I think one of the toughest things as a content creator in fantasy football space, it's very easy to lock into takes and to lock into specific players and situations. I pride myself on when I identify new information that maybe I didn't consider enough previously to adjust. And I think that's one of the best things I can do as a content creator, help all of you as best as possible. And something I'm always open to new information and to adjusting things on the fly as I think through things even deeper than I have so far. So yeah, I would be playing Otton, Kraft, Kincaid over Andrews. I think Andrews versus Ferg is close. I'd lead Andrews over Ferg and Henry. Tough matchup though for Andrews, and the usage has been still sneakily kind of bad. All right, let's keep going with the Kmet or Kincaid. Man, Kmet versus Kincaid is also close. I think it's Kincaid over Kmet. Yeah, it is. And Kmet definitely is a decent option. I feel like the tight end started so bad this season, and all of a sudden there's like a bunch of good options. The last game Kmet played, he was tight end 1, 24 points, 5 catches, 70 yards, 2 TDs. I think there's still a lot of risk with Kmet with the other 3 good receivers, on the Bears, plus DeAndre Swift getting involved. But it's not like Gerald Everett's mixing in like he did in week 1. Matchup's better for Kincaid, though. I think it's Kincaid. Kmet has a slightly higher ceiling. Kincaid has a better floor. So if you want to chase the 20-plus point ceiling, it's Kmet. If you want to chase the 10-plus point floor, it's Kincaid. I think that makes a lot of sense, too. And Njoku or Henry, we're not benching Njoku this week, guys. Do not bench Njoku. Unless you have Bowers or Kittle, do not bench Njoku. And Njoku could be the tight end 1 rest of the season. He could. He was the tight end 1 in the back half of the season last year. He was the tight end 1 last week. 10 catches, 76 yards, and TD. He gets the Chiefs and the Bengals, the bottom 2 defenses versus tight ends to start the fantasy football playoffs. I mean, there's very few tight ends I want more than Njoku. I think he's a really good option, especially with Amari Cooper off the team now too. McBride or Otton? Yeah, it's McBride. JT or Kittle? Oh gosh, I think you got to go JT there. I don't want to start 2 tight ends if I don't have to. Should I drop someone, pick up Kmet to play over Laporta? Yeah, I would. I think you kind of have to go Kmet over Laporta, but Laporta is in this tough category for fantasy, where there's often a bunch of guys in this category every season where you can't start them and you can't drop them. Those are the worst guys for fantasy. You can't drop them, but you can't start them. And I have a bunch of guys like that on my team sometimes too. At the end of my bench, guys like Braylon Allen, guys that are an injury away, Trey Benson from potentially being league winners, and those are okay. But guys like Sam Laporta, you're just kind of waiting for what you're waiting for the breakout game and the role to come back for Laporta. It just hasn't been there. So yeah, I think Kmet over Laporta is fine. Ingram, Olave, or McBride. Yeah, I'm going to Olave. I don't want to start 2 tight ends if I don't have to. Kittle or Kmet? It's Kittle. Kittle ranks number 1, guys, among tight ends this season. You got to start Kittle. Where Pat Freiermuth? Yeah, so Freiermuth didn't make the list. He didn't make the list. He's not in the top 20 tight ends for me. He's like number 22, I think. I really don't think you can start him. Hey, Sam, concerned about BTJ facing Jair Alexander. Would you start McConkey, Mooney, or Romeo Doubs instead? I think that both Mooney and Doubs can be considered. McConkey can't be considered. Let's do this receiver one. We're going to go to the QB starts this next, and then we're going to focus in on the flex options because I know that's where the majority of the questions are. So if you guys got QB starts it, let me know. I got the QB ranks up on the TikTok live. Pull the QB ranks up on the YouTube live. Then we're going to go to the flex options next once I get through this question. All right, so Brian Thomas Jr., sorry. And then we got Romeo Doubs and Darnell Mooney. Man, it's close between BTJ and Mooney. I think Mooney and BTJ are in similar tiers, probably the same tier. Doubs is actually the best matchup of the group. All three of these guys are good starts this week. Honestly, I think I'd lean Mooney. Look at what Mooney did versus the Bucs last time out, 31.5 points, and he has a good floor. The target share has been so consistent for him. He had 31 points, 2 TDs, over 100 yards. He's not getting games under 15% target shares. Brian Thomas Jr., definitely still a good option, in my opinion, against Jair Alexander. The Packers have been good versus the deep threats this season. We know the ceiling's there, obviously, for BTJ. We also know the floor is there a bit. I'm okay going Mooney over Brian Thomas Jr. It's definitely close. Jared Goff is dropping 20 plus. Yeah, I really don't think that's very likely. They're 12-point favorites versus the Titans. I just don't think Goff's going to have to throw much in a game where they're 12-point favorites. No Jameson Williams. I mean, sure, it's possible. Burrow or Purdy, yeah, I got them back-to-back, both in tier 2. I lean Burrow over Purdy, even with T. Higgins out. I think I'd go Burrow over Purdy. If T. Higgins is out, so it sounds like T. Higgins is going to be out. And then McConkey versus D-Hop, yeah, I think I'd probably go McConkey over D-Hop. We'll get to that in a second. Let me see if there's any QB questions here. Cousins or Burrow? Yeah, I think Burrow versus Cousins is super close. I personally lean Burrow. I had this ranking, though, up before the T. Higgins news. I think it's really close now. Love Sundays and content. Need an extra helpful PPR. Stevenson, Dowell, or Chubb, Kraft, or Andrews. Yeah, we got to the tight ends already. I'm going Kraft over Andrews. Stevenson, Dowell, or Chubb is a really rough one. Honestly, I think it might be Chubb. I think it might be Chubb at this point over Stevenson and Dowell. Dowell's not a guy you can start, especially with Dalvin Cook active all of a sudden. It's Stevenson versus Chubb. Stevenson probably projects like a little bit better, but I think I'd lean. Yeah, it's Chubb. Chubb actually projects a little bit better. It's Chubb. Go with Nick Chubb. Better chance of a touchdown, I think. I had just picked up Dak for someone, dropped him. Have Stroud as well. Any advice for this week, rest of season? Yeah, I think Dak is a guy you got to hold rest of season. Look at his schedule, rest of season. And look at his schedule so far this season. Dak is one of the most underrated fantasy QBs right now. Even if he has a bad game this week in an average matchup, he's had one of the, if not the toughest quarterback schedule so far this season. He's only had one very good matchup, and he smashed in that matchup. There's very few quarterbacks in the NFL that can get to over 50 pass attempts in a game. Dak is one of those guys. He did that in that week 3 loss to the Ravens. He's got 2 games over 40 pass attempts. They have no run game. And then you look ahead, and you got to look ahead at the fantasy football playoff schedule. All that matters is the fantasy playoffs. We got to start churning out W's to make sure we make the fantasy playoffs. But guys, as each week goes along now, you got to be making league-winning moves to get your team ready for the fantasy playoffs. And I think adding Dak and stashing Dak is a move that's doing that. They get the Panthers in week 15, who ranked bottom 10 versus quarterbacks this season. And then they get the Bucs in week 16, who ranked dead last for first quarterbacks this season. He does not have a bottom 10 matchup the whole rest of the season. So yeah, I think Dak's a good start today. I think he's a good guy to stash rest of the season. Baker or Dak? Yeah, it's Dak. It's Dak over Baker. And it's tough, man, because Baker's been so good. Baker ranks number 3 in fantasy points per game among quarterbacks. 24.2. I think the only guys beating him are Lamar and Allen or Jaden Daniels, one of those 2 guys. So it's a tough guy to say to bench, and especially, he did decent versus the Falcons last time, 23 fantasy points, not a bad matchup for him, but he's missing both his top 2 receivers. So I definitely am a little bit concerned. Hurts to sit him. Yeah, I definitely agree. It's not easy to sit him, but I think it makes sense. Chase Brown or Tank Dell in PPR. So I think we're ready to get to the running back section of this. I got Goff over Mahomes today, but everything's telling me to switch to Mahomes. Yeah, it's Mahomes. Play Mahomes over Goff. Mahomes also he's got the Kermit the Frog. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Is it Kermit? Someone tell me what the right revenge game narrative here is for Mahomes. Matthew Jensen, no. They say Nick Stroud or Williams, all good matchups. Walter says Williams, but it's a very boom bust. Yeah, so I think this is between Williams and Nix and not Stroud. I think there's a good chance the Texans can really lean on the run in this game. Nix is the floor option. Williams is the ceiling option. There's a bunch of other people in this live asking similar questions here with the QBs. We're focused on the QBs. Let me focus on the QBs for 5 more minutes, and then we'll get to the running backs and receivers. So we'll talk through the QBs a little bit deeper here. So the must starts. There really shouldn't be any questions about any of these guys. You're obviously starting Lamar, even in a tough matchup versus the Browns. You're obviously starting Jalen Hurts in a great matchup versus the Bengals. You got to start Josh Allen, despite the moderate weather passing concerns. Doesn't really matter for Josh Allen specifically because of the rushing. All 3 of these guys have the rushing. Then it's Jordan Love. If you don't have Lamar, Hurts, Allen, you got to start Jordan Love. Then we get into like the real tough start sit decisions after those 4 guys. Then really there's a long tier 2. I got some tiers up on TikTok. If you're watching live on TikTok, if you're watching live on YouTube, I know you can't see those, but in tier 2, I got everyone from Joe Burrow down to CJ Stroud. I think that's tier 2. And so like these are some tough start sit decisions this year. Joe Burrow versus Caleb Williams, Joe Burrow versus Kirk Cousins. Also, these tiers were before the T. Higgins injury. It does not look like T. Higgins is going to play. I think I'd probably still go Burrow over Purdy, but it's super close. And these guys project all really, really close. Caleb Williams gets the Commanders. Caleb Williams has had back-to-back good games. Slightly more difficult matchup here versus the Commanders, but he's coming off the bye too. Definitely a boom-bust option with Caleb Williams more so than these other guys. And then Bo Nix, he's in tier 3 for me, but Bo Nix is one of the safest floors in all of fantasy this week among quarterbacks. I mean, if you just want to lock in at least 15 points, I think he kind of got to go with Bo Nix. Like, if you want to go for the 30-plus point ceiling, that's definitely more likely with Caleb Williams. But Bo Nix, he's been over 20 points in 2 of his last 3 games, and he gets the Panthers. The Panthers' run defense has been terrible. He's had over 60 rushing yards in back-to-back games and no rushing TDs. Like, good chance of over 50 rushing yards and a rushing TD in this game. Not like the Panthers are going to get a lot of pressure on him in this game. You know, another one similar to what I was saying about Stroud, though, with Joe Mixon, like there's definitely a good chance that the Broncos can just lean on the run in this game. The Broncos are big favorites in this game. They're 11-point favorites in this game. So, yeah, I personally would go Caleb Williams over Bo Nix. I personally would go Caleb Williams over Stroud as well. I'm leaning Caleb Williams there. I think you go for the ceiling with Caleb. Purdy or Caleb, I think I'd lean Purdy there. Really close, but a better matchup for Purdy. Similar to the CJ Stroud stuff, though. Similar to CJ Stroud stuff with Purdy, Jordan Mason might just be dominant in this game with the Cowboys rushing attack as bad as it's been. But yeah, I still think I lean Purdy slightly. The Cowboys have been really bad versus quarterbacks too. Start Dak or Nix. Yeah, I'm going Dak. I'm playing Purdy over Dak. I'm playing Dak over Caleb. I'm playing Caleb over Kirk. That one's super close, man. I think I might actually go Kirk over Caleb. Kirk over Dak, maybe too. I mean, Kirk is a really tough guy to bench after he had 500 yards versus the Bucs last time out. I really don't think the Bucs are going to have a solution for the Falcons' passing attack. They didn't have a solution in the first half. They didn't have a solution in the second half of that game last time. Kyler Murray, I haven't seen any questions really about him, but he's the end of tier 3 for me. The guys that I think are all like good options include Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Caleb Williams, Kirk, Stroud, Geno, Nix, Mahomes, and Kyler. After that, I really don't want to start any of these guys. I don't want to start Lawrence. I don't want to start A-Rich, who definitely has some potential, but I don't want to start him. Baker, I don't want to start with at the receivers. Tua, don't want to start him in his first game back. Rodgers, don't really want to start him in a game that I think Brees will be very involved in, but Rodgers arguably has an interesting ceiling. Russ, don't really want to start him, but he played pretty good in his first game. He's startable. Winston, I don't really want to start him, but he's also a sneaky option against the Ravens, who have been horrible versus the quarterbacks. They ranked second to worst versus quarterbacks. And they're without their top 2 corners. I mean, Winston is definitely a sleeper this week too, but yeah, some really tough quarterback start sits this week for sure. But yeah, I think I would lean in this situation. I'd play Caleb over Stroud. I'd play Caleb over Nix, unless you really want to just lock in 15 points. And Daniels is not startable, guys. Jaden Daniels is really, there's a lot of good quarterback options this week, which is why I really think you got to stray away from Jaden Daniels. He's dealing with an injury. Jaden Daniels has been fantastic, but part of the reason he's been fantastic is he's averaging over 50 rushing yards per game. He's averaging over 9 carries per game. And he's just not going to do that in this game, coming off a rib injury against a good Bears defense. The Bears coming off the bye too, which is a little bit scary. I just think there's just too much risk with Jaden Daniels when there's enough good options. There's good options on your waiver wire too at quarterback. Like Bo Nix is just out there for free. He's way safer than Daniels. Arguably Daniels has like a higher ceiling, but does he really even in this game versus the Bears without the rushing potential? I really think we got to bench Daniels this week. All right, well, that's enough quarterback conversation. I think we got to it at length. I mean, all of these guys are really close. There's a lot of sweaty start sits this week. I'd rank them Burrow, Purdy, Dak, Caleb, Kirk, Stroud, Geno, Nix, Mahomes, Kyler. And I'm playing Love, Allen, Hurts, Jackson over all those guys. And honestly, like the Kirk one is the toughest one for me because he did so well versus the Bucs last week. I think there's a really good argument to start him over Caleb, over Dak, over Purdy, and over Burrow and put him right after Love. I think there's an argument for that for sure. All right, let's get to the flex options now. We're going to focus in on the running backs and the receivers next. Goff is just not a start because that game is projected not to be close, and they're going to lean really heavy on the run. The Lions want to be a run-first team, and they're without Jameson Williams, and they're 12-point favorites. So, yeah, I think they're going to be able to run a lot in that game, even though the Titans have been decent versus the run. All right, pick one here. Let me take a quick sip of coffee before we grind through the flex starts. Shout out to everybody in this live right now, by the way. If you haven't yet, hit the like button on YouTube Live. Helps me way more than you realize. Hit the subscribe button, too. If you're watching live on TikTok, guys, smash the follow button. Hit the like button on TikTok, too. There's a like button on TikTok. We're almost at 20,000 TikTok likes. Appreciate everyone who's tuned in right now. Tank Dell, Brian Robinson Jr., Romeo Doubs. Yeah, so I knew we were going to get some Tank Dell questions today, and I really think Tank Dell is a good start today. He had a donut last week. Let me switch to the receivers here on the TikTok live. Switch to the receivers here on the YouTube live as well. I should make a flex ranking too. I'm going to do that in the future lives to get a flex ranking because obviously there's a lot of flex decisions between the two positions too. But Romeo Doubs is in a really good matchup. Doubs has been the best receiver for the Packers. Brian Robinson is also in an interesting spot. Yeah, back-to-back weeks over 15 points for Doubs. Didn't score a touchdown last week, but 8 catches, 94 yards. He's playing the most snaps. He's running the most routes among the Packers receivers. He had a season-high 10 targets, 30% target share last week. After he got suspended for a game and was sort of disgruntled, he's been very involved. And now he gets the Jags, who rank third worst versus receivers. This is a better matchup than he's had the last 2 weeks. The Jags have been crushed by everybody. I mean, every position, basically. The Jags, I think, might be the worst defense in the NFL. Brian Robinson Jr., he doesn't have the best matchup versus the Bears. Middle of the pack matchup versus the Bears. But I feel like the usage is just locked in for B-Rob, especially with Jaden Daniels' injury. Like, B-Rob's going to get 15 carries at least in this game, almost regardless of game script. The Bears have been about average. I think he's arguably the safest floor here. And then Tank, I like Tank a lot too. I think the ceiling is there for Tank. The highest ceiling among all these guys is Tank. Tank Dell has a really high ceiling in this game versus the Colts. If the Colts can keep this game close. The Colts are 5-point underdogs. Man, yeah, this is a really close call. I think Tank and Doubs are both in tier 4 for me. I feel like the better floor ceiling combo is honestly with Doubs over Tank. Looking at this a bit closer, I know my rankings have Tank slightly ahead. My rankings always do skew a little bit towards the boom as well, because that's just my tendency. My tendency is to take risks in fantasy, in life. Like I want to take big risks for potential big rewards, but I feel like Dobbs' ceiling is not that far off from Tank's, as far off as this is showing at least. We haven't really seen the true ceiling from Tank this season. We saw a glimpse of it in week 6, but he still didn't go over 20 points. I mean, neither of these guys has been over 20 points yet this season. Dobbs came close, but he has a higher best score this season. I think I'd go Dobbs here. And then B-Rob's more of a floor play, but I feel like the floor is fine for Dobbs here too. The risk, there's a bunch of game script dependent risk, I feel like this week in some of these games. You know, there's a chance that some of these teams are able to go extremely run heavy this week. The Ravens, 8-point favorites for the Browns versus the Browns. They could be really run heavy. That could be bad news for Andrews and likely. The Lions, they're 12-point favorites. They could be really run heavy. That could be bad news for Monra and Goff and Laporta. The Packers, they could be really run heavy in this game. They're 4-point favorites versus the Jags. Josh Jacobs could smash versus this Jaguars defense. The Texans, they could lean really run heavy. They're 5-point favorites. They were run heavy in week 1 with Joe Mixon, and they were run heavy kind of last week too. Stroud really struggled last week. The Jets could be really run heavy. 7-point favorites versus the Pats. Breece Hall has been cooking. The Chargers could be really run heavy versus the Saints. 7-point favorites. With J.K. Dobbins, they've already been run heavy this season. The Chiefs could be really run heavy versus the Raiders. 8.5-point favorites. With the Kermit the Frog revenge game, not sure that's going to happen. The Broncos could be really run heavy versus the Panthers, 11-point favorites. They clearly want to run. The Panthers' run defense is terrible. The 49ers could be really run heavy versus the Cowboys, with how the Cowboys' run defense has been. I don't think all those games will play out that way, but just a lot of game script dependent risk for some of these pass casters this week for sure. But yeah, I think I lean Dobbs, then Tank, then B-Rob. B-Rob's got the highest projection, though, and the safest floor. Man, I mean, tough call here for sure. But yeah, I think I'd lean that way. A little bit different than what my ranks have it at. Drop 1. Adams, Garrett, Debo, McLaurin. I mean, man, I think it's McLaurin. I mean, it's hard to drop Adams or Garrett Wilson. You definitely can't drop Debo. It's probably McLaurin if you have to drop one of those guys. But I don't know who you're picking up if you're dropping one of those guys. There's always two sides to every single decision in fantasy. There's two sides to it, right? You got an ad. Well, who are you dropping? That's the other side. You got a trade. Well, what's the other side of the trade? You got to start sit. Well, who are you benching? Right? There's two sides to every single start sit. There's two sides to every single ad drop. Even on drafting, who are you drafting this guy over? The opportunity cost is a huge, huge piece of a lot of these decisions. Chase Brown, Ramondre, Madison, Shakir, pick 2. I think this one's Brown and Shakir. I don't want Mondre or Madison. I really don't. Mondre over Madison, though, for me. I really am not interested in Madison in this game. Tillman, McMillan, Dowdle, or Ridley at flex. Yeah, I think it's these first two. It's definitely one of these receivers over Dowdle. Tillman is a good sleeper this week. He is. The Browns should be able to pass effectively in this game. There's a lot of uncertainty with the Browns offense in this game. Obviously, new quarterback for the first time this season starting with Jameis Winston. That is an upgrade, most likely over Deshaun, though, again, a little bit overlooked, in that last game for Deshaun. He was actually having his best game this season, but I digress. He only had one incompletion, guys, in that game. I digress, though. Tillman got a quarterback upgrade with Jameis Winston. They also have a play calling change where they have a new coach calling plays. Hard to know where that will skew the offense. McMillan definitely intriguing with both the Bucs receivers out, and then Ridley. Ridley's going to project the best because who else is getting targets on the Titans, guys? I mean, look at this team. It's Ridley versus Tyler Boyd versus Nick Westbrook-Akine versus Jaquan Jackson. These are the receivers for the Titans, who, by the way, the Titans, they're 12-point underdogs versus the Lions. And the Lions, they rank second worst versus receivers this season. Almost 40 points per game to receivers. And Ridley's, his usage numbers look fine because of this. He's got the 7th most air yards in the NFL. I really think the answer here is Ridley and then Tillman and then McMillan. McMillan projects better. Maybe McMillan over Tillman makes sense. I mean, these are all pretty close. But Ridley has the highest ceiling. I think the answer here is Ridley. As gross as it is to start Ridley to have as bad as he's been this season, Mason Rudolph starting. Ridley does still have a true ceiling, I think. Yo, how's it going? Also, where's Weatherman Sam? Yeah, so Weatherman Sam already tuned in. Yarsman, how we doing? Weatherman Sam's already tuned in once today, but I will tune in again since I know we got some different people in the live now. Really quick one, since I want to get back to the start sits. We are in the start sit segment of the live now. We are live for almost 2 hours at this point. We still got another hour and a half to go, man. It's been a fun one. Week 8 is here. Can't believe we're 2 months in. Shout out to everybody in this live. Yeah, Weatherman Sam is here. Guys, as the weeks go on, Weatherman Sam has more and more work to do each week, and this is not a big week of work for Weatherman Sam. This week, only one game with a quick weather report for you. Only one game. And it's the Bills-Seahawks game. One of the more fun games of the week. One of the games projected to be a little bit closer in comparison to some of the other games. Sustained winds around 17 miles an hour. Let me actually refresh the weather report here. Make sure that nothing's changed dramatically. Doesn't look like it's changed really at all from when I last checked it. There's sustained winds around 17 miles an hour in this game. There is projected wind gusts over 25 miles an hour in this Buffalo Bills game in Seattle. There's also going to be definite rain in this game. This isn't like maybe it's going to rain, maybe it's not. No, it's going to rain. It's probably not going to rain the entire game, though. I think it's going to be a bit on and off, but when it rains, it's going to pour. It's going to be heavy rain. So we got 25+ mile an hour wind gusts and heavy rain in this Bills-Seahawks game. I'm only saying this is a moderate pass game concern because we're not going to be over 25 mile an hour winds for most of the game. That's the real concerning piece of this report. But the combination of some gusts of wind over 25 miles an hour in some parts of the game with very heavy rain, that combo together when that happens you got to expect them to lean a little bit more towards the run and have a little bit less effectiveness in the passing game during those stretches. That pushes me more towards Kenneth and James Cook. I think in general, the short passing game gets a boost and the deep passing game is a little bit of a dog in this game. Still think Josh Allen's a must start. I still think JSN and Lockett are good starts, but it makes me like JSN a little bit more than Lockett with their respective roles. No DK Metcalf today, most likely. It's technically a game time decision, but it seems like he's not going to play. And then James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Shakir, these guys might get a slight boost too. Amari Cooper, he wasn't playing too much of a deep role. I mean, we don't really quite know what his role is going to be, but all these guys I still think are startable. Higgins is out today. Yep, Higgins is not going to play. All right, that's the Weatherman Sam report from that Bills Seahawks game. Still think those guys are decent starts. I'm not panicking, but definitely some modest concern. I'm going Debo over JSN. You got to start Debo. Got to start Debo. Debo over Najee. There's no Ayuk, guys. And I get he's dealing with a wrist injury coming off the illness. Got to start Debo with no Brandon Ayuk, basically always. Hey, Sam, 2 questions. Zay or McMillan? I don't know if you can start Zay Flowers. He gets a bad matchup versus the Browns. He's dealing with an ankle injury. There was concern he would even play. I think he's a must bench. He didn't practice Thursday. He didn't practice Wednesday. Didn't get a full practice Friday. He's still their best receiving option. Yeah, I really think I prefer to bench Zay if I can. And I think you can if you have McMillan. Kraft, Laporta, Andrews, don't let me down. Kraft, Laporta, Andrews. Yeah, so we talked about this one earlier. It's Kraft. Then it's Andrews. Then it's Laporta. Tank Bigsby or Chuba Hubbard. That one's pretty close too. I don't hate Tank this week. I think he's actually right in that same tier as Chuba Hubbard, tier 6 for me, right in that Rashad White tier. Tank versus Chuba is really close. I probably honestly would lean Tank over Chuba Hubbard. We got them right back to back here in the projections and in the rankings. Tank Bigsby, we talked about it when I talked about this game. I've gone through every single game now at this point on this live and talked through every single game, what I think is going to happen. Talked about all the relevant players in each game, the must benches, the must starts, some of the tougher decisions we're getting to now. But Tank Bigsby, he has a ceiling. He has a touchdown ceiling. We've seen it in 2 of the last 3 games. He had 2 touchdowns versus the Pats. He had 2 touchdowns in the game versus the Colts. But against the Bears, when he didn't score, he had only 2.4 points. And the problem for Tank Bigsby is he does not catch passes. He has absolutely no receiving role. He has 2 targets this season. He caught 1 of those targets. He has not run more than 10 routes in a game. Dearness Johnson is the receiving back. And the Jags are underdogs in this game. So if this game gets away from the Jags at home versus the Packers, which I really do not think that the Packers offense will be stopped by the Jags defense. That's why I'm going with the Jordan Love, Tucker Kraft, Romeo Dobbs stack in my DraftKings lineup. Why I think Jordan Love needs to be started and why I'm also on the Josh Jacobs touchdown prop today. I mean, I really like the Packers offense versus the Jags. I don't know how you don't. No offense has been stopped versus the Jags. So if the Jags are trailing, it's not good for Tank Bigsby. Whereas Chuba Hubbard, I think it's just a little bit safer because he can catch passes. He's really not game script dependent. I mean, the Panthers are going to get crushed. They are also massive underdogs this week versus the Broncos. They're 11-point underdogs versus the Denver Broncos. I mean, brutal stuff here for Bryce Young's led Panthers, but he's had at least 10 points in every single game. Chuba Hubbard, really since week 2. He's seeing massive usage to show snap share, rush share. He didn't have a target last game, but they're trailing that he's going to get targets. So yeah, Chuba Hubbard is definitely the safer option. Bigsby's got the higher ceiling. That's how I would play it. Chuba Hubbard projects slightly better, but I personally would lean towards the ceiling with Tank. Reed or Flowers? It's Reed over Flowers. Flowers is injured, guys. He's dealing with an ankle injury. We go back to the receiver ranks. I think you've got a bench. Let me actually go to the high level take here on the TikTok live quick. The receivers I really want to bench. So T. Higgins, he's not playing. Got to bench him. Zay Flowers, he's injured. I think you kind of have to bench Zay in a lot of spots. I don't want to start DeAndre Hopkins in his first game back. This is coming from the guy who also told people to bench Amari Cooper. That didn't work out. Also thought people should bench Adams in his first game. That wasn't a terrible decision. He didn't end up scoring, but he still had decent usage, six points. He only had 3 catches, 30 yards. I think this is more realistic. Adams' ultimate stat line at the end of this game, he had a decent target share, I think. He had 23% target share, but the stat line here, 3 catches, 30 yards. Wouldn't be shocked to see something like this from Hopkins. I think he's got a decent chance at a touchdown, but just not a guy I think you need to force in your starting lineup. Allen or McMillan? Which Allen is this? Keenan? Is this Keenan Allen? I would go Keenan. First and last names are appreciated. Also, scoring settings. Scoring settings are appreciated. Your scoring settings matter a lot, especially with these receiver versus running back decisions. So let me know, is it PPR, half PPR? Part of the reason the Walter Picks app is so powerful is it's going to account for your specific scoring settings. Seeing a lot of quarterback questions still in the TikTok live, so I'll pull the QB ranks. This is how I'm approaching the QBs. McMillan, Devontae Smith, Tank Dell, Keon Coleman, or Tillman. Yeah, so Devontae Smith and Tank Dell. It's Devontae Smith and Tank Dell here. Coleman is exciting. He had a breakout game last week. Can't start him, especially with the weather report. He, among all those guys, probably gets the worst ding there because he plays a truly deep passing role. Tillman's a sleeper, but I'm not starting the sleeper of Tillman over Devontae Smith or Tank Dell. And then I'm not starting McMillan either, who's also a bit of a sleeper. Can't risk starting Daniels, Dak or Tua. Yeah, I really don't think you can risk starting Jane Daniels. I don't. He's injured. He's averaging over 50 rushing yards per game, over 9 carries per game. And those are pretty much all going to vanish, I think, in this game. I would go Bo Nix over Kyler. I think I'd go Dak over Tua as well. I really don't want to start Tua in his first game back. It's not a terrible matchup for him, but I don't want to do it. Debo or Devontae Adams. It's Debo for me over Adams. Pearsall or Worthy. Yeah, that's a good one. Pearsall versus Worthy. I think some of these deeper flex questions are going to be really tough this week. I mean, so many guys bunched together, I feel like, in these tiers. Pearsall is a very interesting rookie sleeper in this game versus the Cowboys tonight. He's going to be playing almost every snap. He was over 70% of the snaps last week in his first game. Ayuk's out for the season. Pearsall, first-round pick, good after the catch. A little bit of an older rookie. Definitely should be able to contribute right away. And then we got Xavier Worthy, who I think is a pretty underrated receiver heading into this week. One, because the DeAndre Hopkins trade getting a bunch of attention. Some people want to start DeAndre Hopkins, which I don't think you can really do out of the gates here, depending on who you're starting him over, of course. But Xavier Worthy's role last week going so under the radar because he didn't do much. 3 catches, 19 yards last week out of the bye. Xavier Worthy had by far his best role of the season last week, guys. He had over 30% target share for the first time. He was over a 30% target share. He was over a 20% target share, for the first time. He had not eclipsed an 18% target share in a game until last week. Xavier Worthy. He had over 60% of the Chiefs' air yards last week. Now we get Kermit the Frog, revenge game for Pat Mahomes versus the Raiders. Those not following that storyline, they made fun of Mahomes' voice, the Raiders defense. Some defenders on the Raiders made fun of Mahomes' voice during the preseason. Mahomes said, we'll handle it when we handle it. And that comes down to today in this matchup versus the Raiders, where the Chiefs are 9-point favorites on the road in Las Vegas. And yeah, Xavier Worthy definitely has an interesting ceiling. I honestly think Pearsall's floor might be a bit better. Worthy's ceiling's a bit higher. Worthy has a really low floor still with his role in the offense. But yeah, I lean Worthy over Pearsall with the role we saw for Worthy last week. And also the Kermit the Frog revenge game here. Debo or JSN? Yeah, it's Debo. I really don't think you can bench Debo with Ayuk out in what should be a high-scoring game versus the Cowboys. Trey Palmer or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., guys. Still got to go Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm going Debo over Devontae. Football Sunday. Let's go. It is the best day of the week. Let me know in the comments, guys, what positions you guys want to see next in terms of the ranks. I'll go to the receivers next here. Running back ranks I'm seeing. Let me switch to the running backs. Let me know in the comments which ranks you want to see next if you're on TikTok or YouTube. If you are watching live on TikTok, I'm telling you the YouTube live is a better viewing experience. Link is right in the TikTok bio. Need some help, Sam. Pitts or Andrews? Yeah, it's Pitts over Andrews. Jaden Reed or Garrett Wilson? It's Jaden Reed. It's Pitts and Reed over Garrett Wilson over Mark Andrews. Kamara or Pollard? Yeah, it's Kamara. Kamara's still a must start. I mean, there's a few running backs I'm going to start over Kamara, but really in all leagues, you got Kamara, you got to start Kamara. Like that's pretty much the bottom line. I'm playing, JSN versus Garrett Wilson. This is not an easy start sit. Just mentally. Some of these start sits just mentally, not easy. You drafted Garrett Wilson for one of your first 2 picks. Someone had to remind me today on the Walter Picks team, like, Sam, does not matter where you drafted these guys anymore. I was struggling benching Rome Odunze for Tyler Lockett in one of my leagues. I drafted Rome Odunze well before. I think Rome Odunze's ceiling's higher than Lockett. But man, you got to be starting Lockett over Rome Odunze. You got to get that stuff out of your head at this point in the season. We're 2 months in. And 2 months in, Garrett Wilson versus the Pats. I mean, this is a really difficult start sit. I want to start Garrett Wilson. Every bone in my body, wants to start Garrett Wilson over JSN, but there's no Metcalf this week. And Devontae Adams is on the Jets now. And Devontae Adams is much more likely to score the touchdowns than Garrett Wilson. Devontae Adams has a very good chance to out-target Garrett Wilson. The matchup's better for Garrett Wilson, though. And there's weather in this Seahawks-Bills game, too. I think you kind of have to go Garrett Wilson, honestly. Looking at this, like, I'm going Garrett Wilson. This is close enough. The weather's worse enough. The matchup's better enough. I just go Garrett Wilson. Trust the bones in your body and go Garrett Wilson, I think, with this one. Hey, Sam, OG Walter Pick subscriber. Thanks, Sam, better in the YouTube live. Guys, the best way that you could possibly support me, possibly support the entire Walter Picks brand, download the Walter Picks app. It's free. It's a free app. And if you use code SAM when you sign up, you also can get access to a free 7-day trial for the subscriptions in the app, for the fantasy side of things, for the player prop side of things, whatever you're into, gonna help you a ton with both those things. Do appreciate that. Seriously, thank you. Hunt or Pickens at flex. Yeah, these are two really good options. I mean, this is a win-win situation. You got to love the win-win start sits. These can sometimes be the most stressful start sits, but it's really, you're in a good spot if you have to choose between Pickens and Hunt. And I think you kind of have to go Hunt. You know, Pickens has a really good ceiling, but so does Kareem Hunt. And the floor for Kareem Hunt is so high. He had over 20 carries in back-to-back games. I mean, the floor for the running backs is almost just always higher than the receivers. It feels like, especially this season. But yeah, the floor is much higher for Kareem Hunt. He's only got a 16% chance to go under 10 points. Pickens has a 30% chance to do that. And the ceilings are comparable. It's Hunt. It's definitely Hunt. Hunt is a really, really good option versus the Raiders. They've not been good versus running backs. Hunt's seeing a massive role. Chuba or Tank? I'd go Tank. I'd go Tank over Chuba. Let me switch the receiver ranks here. Switch up the ranks on the YouTube live. I'll go to the running back ranks. Player props today. Yeah, Nicholas, I got you. Tuning in from Australia. Wow. Flowers, Worthy, Madison, or Algier in the flex. No PPR. 5 yards per point. Rush and reception. I don't know exactly what the scoring settings here you're explaining are, but I think it's still Worthy. Unless if you're getting points per carry here, then it's Madison. If you're getting points per carry, it's Madison. Otherwise, it's Worthy. Hey, Sam, tuning in from Australia. Well, shout out to the Australians on the live today, bro. Bigsby or Waddle? Yeah, I think it's Waddle over Bigsby. Mooney, Amari, or Jonathan Taylor PPR? Yeah. So one of the things that I was really struggling with this morning, thinking through the ranks, preparing myself mentally, physically for the start sits this morning. The Jonathan Taylor start sits. I think it's one of the toughest start sits of the week is Jonathan Taylor. There's a lot of interesting options out there across the receivers and running backs. JT, first round pick. Again, can't really worry about where these guys were picked at this point in the season. But we've seen JT in 4 games. He went over 10 points in all those games. And it's not like he's played bad when he's been out there. He's missed 3 straight games. He's finally back. Not a guy you really want to bench, but the Texans have been good. The Texans were actually the toughest game of the season so far for JT back in week 1, only 48 yards and a TD. What's the role like for JT in his first game back? Are they really going to push it to the limit with JT first game back? Probably not. Still projects the best here though. So yeah, it's JT. It's a tough call, but I think if JT plays, you go JT over Amari, over Mooney. And Mooney versus Amari, man, it's a tough call too. And I think with the weather there in the Bills Seahawks game, I'm actually okay going Mooney over Amari. Colton, hey Sam, OG here. Big trade. Connor and Amari for Lamb. I have too much depth. Sleeper ID is CBS Party 39. Let's pull this up quick here on the YouTube live. If you're watching live on TikTok and YouTube, by the way, guys, we're live on TikTok and YouTube. And I doubt there's many of you watching on both, but if you're watching live on TikTok, come to the YouTube live. I'm about to sync this league from Colton here. We'll see which league it is here. I'm assuming it's not the Dynasty one. We're going to go to the trade analyzer and just show off the trade analyzer here quick and the power of the trade analyzer. This is the best trade analyzer you can find in fantasy football. We got James Conner and Amari Cooper. You said you're trading for CeeDee Lamb. Let's go find CeeDee Lamb. The reason the Walter Picks app trade analyzer is so powerful is it's not just going to give you a trade value insight. I should have just known it was there's someone with this team name in every single league, basically. All right, so we're going to analyze this trade. You're probably giving up comparable trade value here, I would guess. Yeah, a little bit more trade value. But look, it doesn't matter. If you're giving up a little bit more trade value, your team is getting better. You're adding points to your starting lineup. All that matters, guys, is your starting lineup ultimately. And you look at the playoffs, your playoffs getting better. You look at the CeeDee Lamb rest of season schedule. I mean, I don't know how you aren't buying CeeDee Lamb. I love this trade, Colton. Do this trade. Accept this trade right now. This is a fantastic, fantastic trade for you in fantasy. That's the trade analyzer for the Walter Picks app in action there. I will unsync here for the moment. All right. Let's get back to some of these start sits, player props today. And Nick, there's 3 free player props today. I like all 3 of these a lot. And I actually like them in this order. Ja'Tavion Sanders, over 2.5 receptions. He's been over 5. He's had at least 5 catches back-to-back games. The Broncos have been really good versus receivers, but just average, actually a little bit below average versus tight ends. There's no Deontay Johnson this week. Someone's got to catch the passes for the Panthers. And there's going to be some amount of passes completed for the Panthers today. And really, we don't need many completions. Get over this 2.5 line. This is way too low. This really should be a 3.5 or 4.5. Josh Jacobs, over half a touchdown versus the Jags. Jags are allowing over a touchdown per game to the running backs. Josh Jacobs ranks 9th in rushing yards per game this season, but only has 1 rushing touchdown this season. I think he gets in the end zone today on the ground. Kenneth Walker, over 91.5 total yards. I think he goes over 100 total yards today. The Bills are allowing over 150 yards per game to running backs this season. They were one of the worst defenses versus running backs. There's going to be wind and rain in that game. I think Kenneth's usage goes up a little bit from last week as he gets healthier too. Tank or White? I think I go Tank Dell over Shad White. I go Brian Thomas over Tank Bigsby. Similar options, obviously same team, different roles. Stevenson or D-Hop. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Ramondre Stevenson versus DeAndre Hopkins. Again, I really don't think you want to force Hopkins into the lineup this week in his first game. We saw Amari Cooper. He played less than half the snaps. Devontae Adams played a little bit more, but Adams only had 3 catches, 30 yards, despite decent target share numbers. It takes a little bit of time to get adjusted and acclimated to these teams. The Chiefs are massive favorites in this game, 8.5-point favorites on the road. What is the realistic upside of Hopkins? It's scoring touchdowns. I could see him getting involved in the red zone packages, maybe. I think you got to bench Hopkins in this one and go with Mondre. JT or White, please. Yes, JT over White. Dobbs or Pearsall? Definitely Dobbs. Got to be Dobbs. Dobbs a very good option. Start Tony Pollard, Chubb, or Hopkins. Yeah, it's Pollard over Chubb and Hopkins. Pollard is at least locked into a really big role. Thoughts on the good game for Rachaad White? Yeah, Rachaad White's going to have a really good receiving role. He is. He's going to be locked into a very good receiving role. I don't think that's going away, especially with these receiver injuries. He's been one of the better receiving backs in the NFL for a while. But he's going to lose goal line work and rush work still too. Morning, Sam. Happy week 8. Let's go. Yeah, week 8, Billy. It is a great week. It is a great Sunday, best day of the week. We gotta take it in, man. The season's going fast. You got to enjoy these Sundays that we have. It always goes by very, very fast. We are in the thick of it right now. So many tough start sits to work through today. Cook, Achane, Hunt, Javonte Dobbins. These are a win-win situation. All 6 of these guys are top 15 running backs, I think, for me this week. D-Hopper, Brian Thomas Jr. is Brian Thomas Jr. Waddle over Rachaad White, it's Waddle. I'm going CD over Flowers like very easily. I think you have to bench Flowers. So yeah, I have Dobbins, Javonte at the end of tier 3. All these guys are tier 3 or above. Javonte ranks as running back 15, but he ranks as like a top 25 option among running backs and receivers. So yeah, I think in this one, you got to start 3. You have 5 options. Yeah, you got to bench Dobbins and you got to bench Javonte. I think you play Hunt, Achane, and Cook. And I think if you want to play it safe, you would bench Achane and play Javonte or Dobbins. Man, I mean, J.K. Dobbins and Javonte are 2 of the best matchups you can get. But yeah, I think you bench Javonte and Dobbins here and play the other 3. Keyshawn, thanks for doing the TikTok live subscription. I will get to 100% of the TikTok live subscriber comments by the end of the live stream. Mooney, Dobbs, or Dell. I have Diggs and Hill. Mooney, Dobbs, Dell. Yeah, we looked at Mooney. Yeah, these are 3 of the tougher guys. These are good guys to talk about because I've seen a lot of these guys across the start sits. I know we've talked about each of these guys independently already a few times, maybe against each other. Mooney versus Dobbs, really close call. I think I'd play Mooney and Dobbs over Dell. I think Mooney and Dobbs have comparable ceilings to Dell, but better floors. I just don't know how you bench. I don't know how you bench Mooney. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you bench Mooney. I don't know how you bench Kirk Cousins too in certain situations with how they played versus the Bucs last time. There was just no point in that game where the Bucs were stopping the Falcons passing attack. 31.5 points for Mooney in that game, 9 catches, 105. And the floor is good for Mooney. I mean, a really good spot for Dobbs too. Really comparable options here. I think Dobbs and Mooney are comparable, but slightly better floor and ceiling, I think, for Mooney. I go Mooney there. Pick 2, Cooper, Wilson, and Terry. Terry's a really interesting one. If Jaden Daniels is not able to throw as much. And then I still think Garrett Wilson's a good option this week. Just not a wide receiver 1. He's a wide receiver 2. Yeah, it's Cooper and Garrett Wilson over Terry McLaurin. Tolbert or McMillan. That one's really close too. Tolbert versus McMillan. We're on to the wide receivers here. I do think Tolbert, I didn't talk much about Tolbert yet really on this live, but he's definitely an interesting sleeper this week too. Yeah, it's Tolbert over McMillan. McMillan in his own right is a good sleeper. Tolbert is a good sleeper this week too. He's been over 8 points in back-to-back games. Ever since Brandon Cooks went out, he's had a pretty consistent role. He's playing over 90% of the snaps. He had 10 targets back in week 5. Again, the Cowboys, I think, are going to pass a ton this game. I like starting Dak this week for that reason. So, yeah, I think I lean Tolbert. Russell Wilson or Jaden Daniels? Yeah, I think it's Russ. I don't want to start Jaden Daniels. with him dealing with the injury. Let me refresh the news feed here. Make sure we haven't missed anything big. Is today the Halloween weekend? Or is that going to be next week? It falls in like the middle of the week, right? Yeah, the 31st is Thursday night, so we get a game Thursday night. So I guess next weekend? Not sure how that works exactly. Seeing some guys show up in some Halloween costumes here. So inactives, official actives, inactives coming out here. T. Higgins is out. Zay Flowers is in. Will Levis is out. Tyreek Hill is in. Travis Etienne is out. No Jaden Daniels update yet. Bucky Irving's playing. Zay Flowers is playing. Tyreek Hill is playing. Allen Lazard is inactive. That actually is pretty good for both Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Didn't realize he was out. I think that game's later in the day, right? That Commanders game? Yeah. It's at the 4:25 window. But I think Daniels is going to play. And I just don't think you can start him. I think Daniels is going to play, but I don't think you can start him. All right, let's get back to some of these starts. This live stream's flying today. Absolutely flying. Player prop 8, and I got the free player props. Let me just pull them up on screen as I go through some of these start sits. Bucky Irving or Chase Brown? Yeah, I think I'd go Chase Brown over Bucky. Daniels or Purdy? I'd go Purdy over Daniels. Reed or Cooper? I'd go Reed over Cooper. Flowers or Bateman? I'd go Bateman over Flowers. And it feels weird to say, and that might be too extreme. I feel like a weak part of my analysis this season, to some extent, has been over adjusting for injuries. And it's hard. It's hard. Every injury is different. You can't just blanket statement, never start guys that are coming back from injuries or dealing with injuries. But there's definitely additional risk with guys that didn't practice in a week that might not see their full role. And that's the case for Zay Flowers. I think Bateman over Flowers it gives a good sense of how nervous I am about Flowers' role in this game, especially because they're big favorites. They might not even need to throw that much in this game versus the Browns. Though I do think the Browns 8-point underdogs should be favored by, I think the Ravens should be favored by less than 8 in this game with their secondary all banged up. Deep league, Wicks or Palmer? Walter Pick says Wicks has better script, but Palmer has better projection. Oh, man. Yeah, I would go Wicks. I think I'd go Wicks over Palmer personally. Shakir or Pearsall? That one's pretty close. I think I'd lean Pearsall there. Worthy or Shakir? I think I'd probably go Worthy over Shakir. Yeah, Worthy over Shakir. Bijan or Gibbs? You got to start both these guys. Got to start both them. I think Bijan projects a bit better, though. Hey, Sam, PPR would start Dell or Najee in the flex. I'd go Tank. I'd go Tank over Zay. I'd go Tank over McMillan. I'd go Tank over Najee. I'd go Tank over Lockett. I'd go Tank over Keenan. I'd go Tank over Calvin Ridley. Tank over Wandale. Tank over Worthy over McConkey. I don't know if I'd go Tank over Waddle. There's been a few spots where I've told people to bench Waddle. This is the most optimistic you should be about Waddle really since week 1. Waddle's got the better matchup. You got to go Waddle. These are really similar options, but I think Waddle's a slightly better version of Tank this week. Keenan or Lockett? Really close call there. I got Keenan a little bit ahead of Lockett, but there's some weather in that Bills game that makes me like Lockett a little bit less. I honestly might lean Keenan over Lockett because of that. I think the weather is not extremely concerning. It's not like you got to bench all the Seahawks pass catchers. There's going to be some wind gusts over 25 miles an hour and some heavy rain throughout that game. But it is enough that I think the close ones, you lean away from the deep pass catcher receivers in that game, specifically Tyler Lockett, Keon Coleman. Go to the tight ends. I got you. We'll go tight ends, then we'll go QBs here. Would you go Tank over Chuba or Brian Thomas Jr.? So I think Tank Dell has a higher ceiling than Chuba Hubbard, but a lower floor than Chuba Hubbard because he doesn't catch passes. So he's game script dependent. He's touchdown dependent. So I think Tank has a higher ceiling, though. And it's close enough that I think I would go Tank over Chuba Hubbard. But if you want to lock in at least 10 points, Chuba's the better option. Dowdle, Pearsall, Olave. I think this one's got to be Olave, man. I know he's missed some games, but there's no Rashid Shaheed now. I mean, Olave's like locked in to such a good target share. Rattler's obviously struggled. But yeah, I think you got to go Olave. I think Olave is definitely still startable. Been here for hours. Got you next. Rodrigo, Flowers, Dobbs, or Tony Pollard? It's Dobbs here easily. Easily Dobbs over Flowers and easily Dobbs over Pollard. Suyal, good to see you back in the YouTube live. We're live on TikTok and YouTube right now. We've been live for almost 2.5 hours, and we still are just getting started. Another solid 45 minutes to go before we wrap up here. Trey Palmer, Cedric Tillman, Yoshavas, Josh Palmer, Wick/Watson, Freddie, thanks for doing the TikTok live subscription. Michael Wilson, Gabe Davis, Vele/Franklin. I mean, my God, you got to go Cedric Tillman here first. First off, Cedric Tillman. He definitely stands out amongst all of these other guys. T. Higgins is out. Yoshavas is definitely an intriguing option because of that. Wick/Watson, pretty interesting too. I don't think you can go Vele or Franklin. I think you go Cedric Tillman and Yoshavas or Cedric Tillman and Palmer. I think I just said Wicks over Palmer, though. I think it's actually Cedric Tillman and Wicks. I don't think you can just go Watson over Wicks. Watson does have a high ceiling. Yeah, Cedric Tillman and it's Wicks for me. And then Kyler, Nix, Tua, or Wilson. It's one of these first two. I think it's Nix over Kyler, but it's close. I think Nix over Kyler is fine, though. I think Nix is a pretty good floor. Pick one, full PPR. McMillan, Downs, Ladd, Bucky, then A-Rich or Nix. Thanks, bro. I got you, Duke. And it's Nix over A-Rich. It feels gross, but it is. The matchup's better for Nix for sure. Nix has been over 60 rushing yards back-to-back games. I'm going Kate Otten over Laporta. Seeing that one in the TikTok live. This is a tough one here. I kind of want to say McMillan, but it really might be Downs or Bucky. Let's see here. And we gotta compare Ladd too. Let's get Bucky out of here. Don't do Bucky. Let's get Ladd. Yeah, wow. Ladd does project a bit better here versus the Saints. Downs is a super intriguing option, but he actually projects the worst with how Anthony Richardson has played. These are the really tough start sits, I feel like, this week. I mean, all three of these guys in really similar tiers. I'm going Otten over Ferguson. I'm going Pitts over Otten, though. I think you got to go Ladd here. He's dealing with a hip injury, which is like a little bit scary. Honestly, McMillan, I feel like actually has the highest ceiling. Walter actually agrees with me on that. McMillan has the highest ceiling. And it starts it like this, maybe that's enough to just go McMillan. McConkey's probably the best combo floor ceiling, though, of all these guys. And Downs is just like a solid floor play, maybe, but his floor is still kind of scary with A-Rich. I think I would rank those guys Ladd, then McMillan, then Downs, but I think it's really close between Ladd and McMillan. Pick one flex. Chase, good to see you in the YouTube live. Guys, shout out to everybody in this live stream right now. We are about an hour away from 7 hours of commercial-free football. Cannot wait. This is what I've been saying it a bunch this season, but I really truly like to think of this. This is the true witching hour for fantasy. This is the true time when your wins become losses and your losses become wins in fantasy football. This is when you make the decisions that change the outcome of your season. Got to get these start sits right. That's why you got to download the Walter Picks app for free in the YouTube description, in the TikTok bio. If I can't get your start sit, I've gotten to hundreds already. I'm going to get to a bunch more still, but if I can't get to your start sit, the Walter Picks app is the place to go. Chase is 7-0. Let's go, Chase. Ladd, Downs, Tolbert, Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, Troy Franklin. Yeah, so it's Rachaad White over Bucky in PPR. It's got to be Rachaad White over Bucky. Tolbert in here. I think this one's Rachaad White. I think in PPR, you go Rachaad White here. I think the Bucs are going to be playing from behind. They're without their top two receivers. Rachaad White should have another big receiving game today. Is Daniels playing? It does look like Daniels is going to play, but he's playing through an injury. He really can't be started for fantasy. I'm starting Purdy over Tua. I'm playing Amari over Najee, I think. Mooney versus JSN, super close. I think I lean, honestly, Mooney now that there's that weather report for the Bills, but it's close. It's definitely close. I think I'd go Mooney over JSN. I've got to feel really good about Mooney, guys. He had 31 points last time out versus the Bucs. I've been using the app every week in 5-2. Adam, let's go, man. Appreciate you guys checking out the app. Let me know if you guys ever have feedback about the app, too. We're always improving the app. Start two at running back. Chuba Hubbard, Pollard, Najee, Mostert, Flex, Diggs, Mooney, or Waddle. Mooney versus Waddle is a really, really close one. Chuba, Pollard, Najee, Mostert. Start two here. Don't start Mostert. This is really between this first three. You can't start Mostert over any of these guys. I think you probably bench Pollard or Najee. Man, Pollard's role is just so locked in with Tajay Spears out, so he projects actually better than Najee. It's actually bench Hubbard. Yeah, bench Hubbard. Play Pollard, play Najee, bench Hubbard. And then Diggs, Mooney, Waddle. I know a lot of start sits across all three of these guys. Let's get to this one. I think Diggs has to be started with Nico out. I really like Mooney too. And then Waddle, you gotta feel pretty good about. But I think Waddle's actually the guy to bench here. Yeah, play Mooney over Waddle, play Diggs over Waddle, Zay or Lockett. I'm going Lockett over Zay with the ankle injury for Zay. Definitely nervous about that, especially with the spread on that game. Sam, Pearsall, Rome, or Tillman at flex. Tillman, Rome versus Pearsall. Man, this is a tough one. I really struggled in one of my own leagues with the Rome Odunze versus Tyler Lockett decision. I want to start Odunze for the ceiling, but Lockett a little bit better of a target projection. I'm going with Lockett there. This one's Odunze, though. Good matchup for Odunze. Good ceiling for Odunze. I said it earlier in the live. I'll say it again. I think Odunze is one of the most underrated receivers, just period, in the NFL, regardless of fantasy for a second. No one really thinks about him as one of these better receivers in the league. He only has one big game, but I think he's going to have some big games down the stretch here. Chiefs defense, Chargers defense, or Jets defense. Yeah, I don't think I've shown the defenses once yet. I'll pull the defenses here. Haven't had many defense questions, but there's some clear top defenses. I actually think ignore the Ravens here. This was before their injury reports, but the Steelers, the Jets. I think the Jets probably number one, and then the Chiefs, and then the Chargers. Yeah, I'd go Jets, Chiefs, then Chargers. All three good options, though, for sure. I feel really good about the Jets and the Chiefs specifically, though. Flex Wandale or Bucky? That's a tough call. I'd probably go with Wandale there. If it's a PPR league, I think I'd go Wandale over Bucky. I play Nick Chubb over Wandale, though. Chris Olave or Keenan Allen, PPR. This one's definitely close, too. I know some tough Olave decisions this week. It's Olave. Keenan, better matchup. Wow, they projected the same amount of points. Look at the much different distributions here. I think Olave is the better option over Keenan this week with no Rashid Shaheed in the lineup now. Daniels, Kyler, or Kirk? I'd go Kirk, then Kyler, then Daniels. I do not think you can start Daniels, guys, playing through a rib injury. Garrett Wilson, Connor, or Kamara PPR at flex. You can't bench Kamara. In a PPR league, you just can't. There's just no way to bench him in most situations. Even though the matchup's tough, he's not been as good, in his past few games. It's still Kamara. I think we'll see what Garrett Wilson projects, but yeah, it's Kamara. Pickens or JSN, it's Pickens. Weatherman Sam is here for you guys all season long. And the Weatherman Sam has one report today. Just one. Every other game is going to be fine. There might be occasional light wind in some of these other games. But there is weather to watch out for in this Bills Seahawks game. Sustained winds around 17 miles an hour. On its surface, that's not concerning. On its own, not concerning. Wind gusts over 25 miles an hour, a little bit concerning. Sustained winds over 25 miles an hour, that's when it gets extremely concerning. But we're not going to see that. We're going to see wind gusts over 25. But there's also going to be heavy rain throughout the game. All these things combined, a little bit concerning. Moderate concern for the past games here. For Josh Allen, for Geno Smith. I think it's not enough for me to say bench all of these guys. It is enough for me to say, in close calls, bench some of the deep pass catchers in this game. Keon Coleman, Tyler Lockett. Lockett to Dunze decision, I think for me, it's getting even tougher. JSN, I think he's fine. I still think he's a good start. Amari Cooper, I still think he's a fine start. Kincaid, fine start. I think this honestly bodes well for both James Cook and Kenneth Walker. I like the Kenneth Walker props today. Pickens or Terry? Yeah, it's Pickens over Terry. You got to start Pickens, guys. Pickens is a smash start right now. Smash start. Pickens is way better than people realize. And people are going to start realizing it now that he has a quarterback that fits well into his skill set. So yeah, it's Pickens over Terry for sure. Waddle versus Mooney. Yeah, we talked about this one a bunch. It's Mooney. It's Mooney over Waddle. Start Mooney or Reed. Yeah, it's Reed over Mooney. I feel very good about Mooney, but Reed is an even better spot versus the Jags. Good morning, Zachary, Nix, Russ, Kyler, and Chuba or Javonte in PPR. It's Javonte over Chuba Hubbard easily. Other sides of the same game here. Javonte is going to smash. Javante's coming off his best game of the season. He gets dead last run defense in the league. And then Nix, Russ, Kyler. This is really between Nix and Kyler, in my opinion. I know Russ played well last week. I think he's startable. There's a bunch of QBs that are startable this week. Let me just run through the QBs again really quickly here. I think I've had the QBs up. Let me put the QBs up again on the YouTube live too. If you guys are watching live on TikTok, guys, we're also live on YouTube. YouTube is the better viewing experience. I can share screen on the YouTube live. I can't do that on TikTok. Link to the YouTube live is right in the TikTok bio. But shout out to everybody, no matter where you're watching. The QBs, there's some really tough QB starts here. It's really after the top two tiers. Tier one, really after the top tier, really actually. It's the tier one, Lamar, Hurts, Allen, and Love. These guys are smash starts. Start all of these guys. Really, I don't think I've seen a start sit with any of them because it's just so obvious you got to start those four guys. Then you get to the tier two quarterbacks, Burrow, Purdy, Dak, Caleb Williams, Kirk, Stroud. I mean, all these guys are so close together. And then even in tier 3, there's some guys you could argue over tier 2. Geno, Nix, Mahomes, Kyler. And then even in some of these tier 4 spots, Baker. In tier 5, Baker, Russell Wilson, even Jameis Winston, I think is sneaky. Obviously, Jaden Daniels, I got really low because I don't want to start him off the injury. But yeah, personally, I think it's Nix over Kyler. It's close, but I think it's Nix over Kyler. And I'd start both these guys, I think, over Russ versus the Giants. I'd start Russ over Jaden Daniels, though, playing through the rib injury. I really think it's not smart for the Commanders to put Jaden Daniels out there this week with the rib injury. What's doing, Sam? How are we doing? We're doing great. It's week 8. We got like an hour till kickoff now. It's been a great stream. Still going. We got tons of start-sits still to get to. Shout out to everybody that's live right now. Do appreciate you. Dak or Goff? Yeah, I'm going Dak over Goff. Do I drop Baker for Tua? No, I don't think you need to do that. And Debo or Pickens to start. Yeah, this one's close. I think I got Debo ahead of Pickens. It's a really close call. I think the matchup's better for Debo. Is it though? Let's see. Actually, Pickens might be the better matchup. Yeah, it is. Pickens has a slightly better matchup, but Debo without Ayuk is just always going to project so well. Happy Sunday, Sam. Happy Sunday to you as well, Kylo. Would you start Bucky, D-Hop, or Coleman over Mooney and Hubbard? Nope. Wouldn't start any of those guys over Mooney or Hubbard. Also, do you think Olave and JT are comfortable starts again? I do. I think they're both comfortable starts. I'm a little less comfortable about JT just because what is his full role really going to look like? Coming off the ankle injury, but yeah, I still think they're pretty comfortable starts. In Olave, I think the target share is just going to be there for him without Shaheed. Hey, Sam, George Pickens or JSN PPR? It's Pickens. It's Pickens out. JSN's like a little bit arguably safer floor. He runs some more shallow routes, but it's Pickens. For sure, it's Pickens. Kraft, Andrews, or Kmet? Yeah, it's Kraft, then Kmet. It's Kraft, then Andrews, then Kmet, I think. Let me go back to the tight ends here. Andrews is a really tough call, and I think the matchup is kind of tough for Andrews. I actually adjusted my tight end ranks a little bit during this live stream, so I got slightly different tight end ranks over on YouTube where I can adjust the ranks. Can't adjust them on the TikTok live after it starts. But I would go Kraft over Andrews. I'd go Kincaid over Andrews. I'd go Kmet. I'd go Andrews over Kmet. But yeah, I'm going Kraft over Andrews. Kraft is in a good spot this week. He's in my DraftKings lineup this week, stacked with Jordan Love. Good matchup against the Jags. Rashad White or Romeo Doubs. It's Romeo Doubs. Dak or Goff, it's Dak. I'm going Reed over Flowers. I'm going Dobbs over Flowers. I think you got to bench Flowers dealing with the ankle injury. I would bench Zay Flowers. Why bench T. Higgins? He's straight up not playing. I mean, he's not playing. He got a quad injury on Friday. So he's just not playing. Yeah, so you got to bench T. Williams, Mahomes, or Cousins? Yeah, these quarterback start sits are so tough here. Like I really think there's a good argument for Cousins here. You got the Kermit the Frog narrative from Mahomes this week. Raiders made fun of him in the preseason. We'll see him get his revenge today, but he hasn't been over 20 points once. Like on paper, without the Kermit the Frog revenge, I don't think you could even consider Mahomes here. It's Caleb versus Cousins, and honestly, I think it's Cousins. I think it's Cousins over Caleb Williams. Yeah, I got you. I got the DFS line if you let me pull it up. Hunt, Mason, or Connor? Let's go to the running back ranks here. Let me know in the TikTok live which ranks you guys want to see next. It's Mason, then it's Hunt. Mason gets the Cowboys. It should be a really high-scoring game. Hunt's in a really good spot, too. He's at over 20 carries back-to-back game. But yeah, it's Mason. Just slightly over Hunt. Ray Davis or Bucky? Yeah, I'd go Bucky over Ray Davis. I'd start Marvin Harrison Jr. over McMillan. JSN over McMillan. I'd play Bigsby over Flowers. Think Kittle will play? Yeah, I do think Kittle will play the whole game. He was also questionable heading into this game. Cook, Monty, or Bigsby? Yeah, it's James Cook. I haven't seen any Monty. That was the first Monty question I've seen. Wow, pretty crazy. Good afternoon, Sam. Scary Terry, Chase Brown, or Bigsby at flex half PPR. Thank you, sir. Yeah, this in half PPR is closer. Appreciate the scoring settings here. Again, if you use the Walter Picks app, it'll be custom to your scoring settings. Link to the app is in the TikTok bio and the YouTube description. Best possible app you could use for start sit advice, trade advice, draft advice in the future too. I think Debo, I wouldn't call him a safe start, but it's a must start. Debo's a must start because he's got a high ceiling, Grant. Terry McLaurin, he's got a super high ceiling without Ayuk. Chase Brown, and then Bigsby. It's a really close one. It's Chase Brown. Chase Brown. Man, part of me wants to say Bigsby here, but yeah, the running backs typically get a slight lean. Yeah, you got to feel very good about Brees and Mixon. They're the only 2 tier 1 running backs. I mean, their floors are just so high. The usage has been so great. The matchups are great. QB ranks got you with the QB ranks. Caleb or Jaden Daniels says Caleb. Bench Jaden Daniels. Bench Jaden Daniels. The only time all season I feel like I'm going to be saying that. Scary Terry or Tank Dell. This one I think is also kind of close. It's a much better matchup for Tank Dell. I'm still on half PPR. Let's switch back to PPR. Crazy to start Olave over Marvin Harrison Jr. Not crazy at all. Nope. Definitely would start Olave over Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Olave is a really good option, guys, without Rashid Shaheed. It's the only hesitation I have about Olave is Spencer Rattler, of course. But if he's going over a 30% target share, I think Olave can smash. Man, Tank Dell projects just slightly better than McLaurin, who's maybe a slightly safer option. A floor ceiling decision here. McLaurin's got a high ceiling too, but a tougher matchup. I'd go Tank. I'd go Tank over McLaurin. Diggs or Bigsby? It's Diggs. Start Diggs. Start Jaden Reed over Mostert for sure. You got to start Jaden Reed over Mostert. I don't know how you feel good starting Mostert. Mostert fumbled the game away last week. Definitely a chance Jalen Wright mixes in more. Obviously, Achan's not going anywhere. OG here. Pick 2. Jacoby, Ladd, Shakir. Yeah, Jacoby off the injury. I think I'd just go Ladd and Shakir here, Brett. I think I'd bench Jacoby in his first game back against a really tough Chiefs defense. OG here. Do I start Pittman, Kirk, or Shepard? Love the content, sir. Keep it up. Grant, appreciate you as well. Shout out to everybody in this live stream right now. If you're watching live on TikTok, guys, smash the follow button on TikTok. It's basically impossible to see people's comments that don't follow. That's just how the TikTok live comments work from my perspective with how TikTok shows the comments. So hit the follow button if you want your comment answered on TikTok. If you're on YouTube, guys, smash the subscribe button. Do appreciate that too. Shout out to everybody, no matter where you're following. Thanks for the follows, guys. Do appreciate it. Will help me get to those comments. Pittman, Kirk, or Shepard. Yeah, it's none of these guys I feel good starting. Grant, this is a tough call. Definitely tough start sit here. I think it's probably Kirk. I mean, Pittman has a ceiling, but he's so tough to trust because the floor. Yeah, it's Kirk here. It's Kirk. Go with Christian Kirk. Potential high-scoring game. Debo or Waddle? It's Debo. Dak, Nix, or Herbert? It's Dak. It's Dak. Myers, Tillman, or Marvin Harrison Jr. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., then Tillman, then Myers, I think. I'd bench Myers if I can. I'm playing Olave over Flowers very easily. Wide receiver rankings. Yeah, I got you with the wide receiver rankings. Oops. Got you with the receiver ranks. Let me know in the comments which one you want to see next. Good afternoon. Otten or Kelsey? It's Kelsey. The tight end ranks are pretty straightforward, as usual. Tight end ranks pretty straightforward. You're starting Bowers. You're starting Kittle. You're starting Njoku. Then it's Kelsey, Ingram, McBride, then Pitts, Otten. Then I go Kincaid, Kraft. I actually think I would go Kraft over Kincaid. Then Ferg, then Henry, then Andrews. Henry or Ferguson? Yeah, I think it's Ferguson over Henry. It's super close call. I think I'd go Ferg. I'd lean Ferg over Henry. I feel just a little bit better about that Cowboys offense and the Pats offense just in general. Thanks for all you do. PPR, need a wide receiver and flex. Pollard, Scary, Olave, Chase. Yeah, PPR, just go Olave. Go Olave. Go Olave easily over Hopkins, over McMillan, over Shakir. I think Olave over Pollard's fine. Pollard's locked into a really good workload without Spears, but they're huge underdogs. The team's awful. Also, just got to trade across. Send Hopkins / McMillan and get Pickens. Do this, Levy. Do this. There's some, unknown upside with Hopkins and McMillan that is real. There's some real unknown upside there. But there's some known upside with Pickens. Pickens projects as a top 15 receiver. Like I think Pickens over Olave this week, for example. So you're just upgrading over Olave already. Pickens almost is a top 10 receiver option this week. Ranks in the top 12. Allen or Kirko? Yeah, it's Allen. It's Allen over Kirko. Kirk Cousins is definitely a good option, though. Yeah, Pickens versus Olave. Pickens, guys, I feel like Pickens is like still underrated, even with that breakout game. Look at some of these numbers for Pickens. George Pickens, he's 14th in yards per game this season, despite playing with Justin Fields for most of the season. He ranks 6th best in target share. He has 8th most air yards per game in the NFL. He has the 3rd highest air yard percentage. He's almost 50% of the Steelers' air yards this season. I mean, he's the entire receiving offense. His target per route run rate ranks in the top 10. His yards per route run ranks in the top 12. His yards per reception ranks in the top 12. I mean, he's one of the most efficient, productive receivers in the NFL, and he now finally has a quarterback that matches his skill set. Tua or Baker? Yeah, that one's tough. I think I'd lean Baker over Tua. And Njoku or McBride? It's Njoku over McBride. And I don't bench McBride very easily. He arguably is the best tight end role in the NFL. He's top in the league in target share. He's top in the league in air yards among tight ends. He really doesn't have a game with bad usage. Look at these numbers we're watching live on YouTube. Why sit Flowers? Because he's battling through an ankle injury, and the Ravens are 8-point favorites. I think he's got a really low floor, Zay Flowers, this week. But yeah, and Njoku is in a smash spot versus the Ravens this week. There's no Amari Cooper now. He's got a quarterback upgrade with Winston. The Ravens are without multiple pieces of their starting secondary. I think Njoku is a top 3 tight end option this week over Trey McBride. Really, Bowers is the only guy I'm comfortably starting over David Njoku this week. Been on the stream since the beginning. Appreciate you, man. Blake, thank you so much. It's been a long live. Appreciate everyone that's been here, for a long period of time. Start 3, Kamara, Gibbs, Taylor, Debo, or Cooper, PPR. I wish you could sort the comments by length of time you've been in a live. That would be cool. Kamara, Gibbs, Taylor, Debo, or Cooper. Yeah, this is a good option. You probably ought to bench Taylor and Cooper here. You go Kamara, Gibbs, and Debo. Go Kamara, Gibbs, and Debo. Bench JT if you can in a spot like this. I do think Debo's going to play. Yep, does sound like he's going to play. If he plays and Ayuk's obviously not playing, you got to start. Cooper definitely gets a small ding with the weather report for that Bills Seahawks game too. JT or Jordan Mason? It's Jordan Mason. Chiefs or Broncos? It's the Chiefs defense. JSN or Adams is really close. Definitely really close. Pick 3. I think I'd probably go JSN over Adams, but man, that's a tough call. Actually, with the weather, I already said Garrett Wilson over JSN. I think I'd go Adams over JSN too. Garrett Wilson and Adams are like neck and neck in my mind. Bo or Dak? Yeah, I'd go Dak over Bo. I'd go Dak over Kirk too. I'd go Dak over Jaden Daniels also. Monty, Swift, Hunt, Neighbors, Terry, BTJ, Javante, Tank. Pick 3, half PPR. Go with the running backs here. Go with Hunt. Go with Javante, definitely. And then Swift, you probably have to go Neighbors. It's Hunt, Neighbors, and Javante. That's how I would play this one. Kelsey, Debo, Myers at flex. It's Debo. Debo over Kelsey. Shakir, Allen. I'd go Keenan Allen over Shakir. Love the content. Thanks, man. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Tank Dell PPR. This one's close. I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting a little bit too much hate. I know he's been very inconsistent, has had a low floor at times. I think he might project worse this week than Tank. Yeah, he does. It's Tank over Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. I still think I'd probably prefer Marv rest of season. Dolphins have been number 1 versus receivers somehow this season. Olave, D-Hop, or Pearsall. It's got to be Olave, guys. He's projected for a very strong target share. I'd go Winston over B-Rob in the super flex. Winston has a sneaky ceiling. He has a very sneaky ceiling with the Ravens, multiple pieces of their secondary out. So many good running back options this week. Javante gets a great matchup. Dobbins gets a great matchup. James Cook is going to smash. Kamara is a must-start even in a tough matchup. Kareem Hunt gets a great matchup. Achane has Tua back. Jordan Mason gets a great matchup. Josh Jacobs gets a great matchup. Gibbs is a smash no matter what the matchup is. Bijan gets a pretty good matchup. Kenneth gets an amazing matchup. Joe Mixon and Brees get amazing matchups. I mean, so many good matchups for the running backs feels like this week. Waddle or Amari or Dobbs. I already have Reek starting. Yeah, it's Waddle versus Dobbs here. I think over Amari. I think it's Waddle and Dobbs over Amari with the weather report in that game. Waddle gets a slight edge. I don't hate just going Waddle and Tyreek and just locking in the Tua points. It's a bit of a floor play, though. I think playing Dobbs and Tyreek might be the better ceiling option for you. Amari Pickens or Devontae, and why? Amari Pickens so first it's Pickens. It's got to be Pickens. So Amari, I think, gets a slight dip in my mind this week with the weather report. 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts, downpouring rain throughout that game. Pickens is coming off his best game of the season. Pickens, we just talked about it. He ranks top 12 in all the meaningful efficiency categories. He ranks top 12 in target share, air yard share. That's not efficiency, that's volume. But he ranks top 12 in yards per run and yards per reception. He gets the Giants, who on paper, guys, this is the best matchup on paper for George Pickens all season. He's a top 12 option this week. Extremely high ceiling. And Javante's got a good matchup too. I don't bench Javante very easily this week. Him or Garrett Wilson, I'm kind of scared to bench, but I think Pickens is a better option than both. OG sub 43, pick 2. Bucky, Tracy, Stevenson. Wow, sub 43 Grant. Crazy stuff. Bucky, Tracy, Stevenson. Pick 2 here, man. I don't feel good about Tracy at all. I think you kind of have to start Stevenson in this one. He's the only clear lead back of this group. Yeah, it's Tracy over Bucky. I'd go Tracy. And Mondre here. Debo or Jordan Mason. Oh, man. I think it's Jordan Mason over Debo. Brian Robinson or Olave. I do like B-Rob this week. I think I like Olave more if it's PPR. I think I'd probably go Olave over B-Rob personally. B-Rob might project a bit better, though. Yeah, he does. B-Rob does project a bit better. He's probably a bit safer. You got to think he gets more rushing work with the Jaden Daniels injury, too. I think I'd lean Olave still, though, in PPR. Javonte, BTJ, or Mooney. I'm already starting Hunt, Dobbins, and Amon-Ra Neighbors. Also Otten or Ferguson. Yeah, it's Otten over Ferguson. It's Javonte over Brian Thomas Jr. and Mooney. You got to start Javonte versus the Panthers. It does look like Debo's playing. Yeah. Good morning, Sam. It is no longer morning. Good afternoon to everybody in this live stream. We've been going since this morning. We're heading towards the ending part of this live stream now. But Mooney, Monty, or Najee for flex. Yeah, I rank these guys in this order. Mooney, then Monty, then Najee for flex and PPR. Should I play Najee or Monty over them? No, I wouldn't play Najee or Monty over either of these guys. And then Kincaid or Kmet in PPR. Yeah, super tight between Kincaid and Kmet. I do think that weather in the Bills game, it hurts Kincaid a bit, but it hurts him a little bit less since he's more of the intermediate short route guy. Kmet's coming off a massive game in his last game. Kincaid, I think I would go with, though. Tank in a bad game script or Hunter Henry. Definitely Tank. Definitely Tank. BTJ or Devontae. I think I'd go Devontae over Brian Thomas Jr. Walter, classic mistake. My name is Sam. Walter is the AI model I helped build that powers the Walter Picks app. I've spent the last 4 years of my life helping build the Walter Picks app. Classic mistake. Do not worry about it. Download the Walter Picks app in the YouTube description, in the TikTok bio. Again, my name is Sam. Walter's the AI model that powers the Walter Picks app to give the Walter Picks app the best possible projections you could possibly find. Again, link is in the TikTok bio in the YouTube description for the Walter Picks app. Also, guys, if you're watching live on TikTok, the YouTube Live is a better viewing experience. Come to the YouTube Live. Link is in the TikTok bio for that. If I don't get your start sit, though, you got to go to the Walter Picks app. Free start sit comparisons in the Walter Picks app. Kelsey or McBride? It's Kelsey over McBride. Flowers, Worthy, McMillan, D-Hop, Tolbert, or Leggett. Pick two. Yeah, so I'm benching Flowers. Just generally, I think the floor is really low. But in this one, tougher to bench him. I think you probably go these first two guys. I think you play Flowers and Worthy over Tolbert, Leggett, and McMillan and D-Hop. Really tough call. All these guys are pretty bunched together for me. But I'm nervous to start Flowers the ankle. I don't think I'd bench Flowers, though, for McMillan or Tolbert or Leggett. I really don't think you can start Leggett, too, either against Pat Surtain. Again, if you're watching live on TikTok, too, guys, I'm not going to be able to see your comment unless you follow. That is how TikTok works from the way I see the comments. So hit the follow button. I did tell a lot of people to bench Puka Nacua Thursday night. That was an L for me. I'll take the Ls. I'm going to have some Ls over the course of the season. It was a little bit too conservative with the Puka stuff. His line was at 28.5. He hit that in the first drive. He was way healthier than I thought. That was definitely a miss on my end. Adams or Cooper? Knicks or Murray? Already have Brees started. Yeah, I think it's Adams over Cooper. And I think it's Knicks over Murray. I'd go Adams over Amari, and I'd go Knicks over Murray. Tank Bigsby or Chuba? Yeah, I'd go Tank over Chuba. Have a great Sunday as well, Kyla. Wait, Walter, will you take over my team? I'm 0-7. I don't want to do the punishment. Download the Walter Picks app. The link is in the YouTube description. You can then sync your league to the app. It's going to help you add the right players. It's going to help you start the right players. It's going to help you not get fleeced in trades so you don't do the last place punishment. But no, it's not going to do it for you. You're still going to have to do it. Sam, you're the best part of my Sunday, man. Thanks, Tom. Pick one for flex. Marvin Harrison Jr., Rachaad White, and Dowdle. Yeah, so I really think it's between these first two guys. I don't feel good about Dowdle at all. Dalvin's going to be active. Dowdle's really just shown no ceiling this season. Not the best matchup for the run game there either, and they're underdogs. So I don't want Dowdle. I definitely would start White over Dowdle. Marvin Harrison Jr. versus White, super close. Dolphins have been good versus the receivers. It's White. Yeah, it's White in this game. That could be a pretty high-scoring game between the Bucs and the Falcons. White might have more receptions than Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he really might. He had a huge receiving game last game. He was the running back 2 last week because he had 6 catches for 71 yards and 2 TDs. He ran 20 routes. Only a 13% target share, but without the receivers, you got to think he stays pretty involved. The rush share is not really going to be there for White, but yeah, I think you go White. I think a bit of a safer floor and arguably a similar ceiling to Marvin Harrison Jr. Hey, Sam, pick one. Debo, Reed, Pickens, PPR, all really good options here. Very, very good options here. Let's go to the receiver ranks here again on the TikTok Live. Go over the receiver ranks here on the YouTube Live as well. We got Debo, Reed, and Pickens. So I got Debo in tier 2, firmly in tier 2, right after Malik Neighbors, right before Jaden Reed. So Debo and Reed in same tiers for me. And then Pickens is the top of tier 3, so one tier below. So I really think you got to choose between Debo and Reed here. All of these guys have pretty good ceilings. Debo's got the highest ceiling, but also the highest floor. But like you got to consider coming off the wrist injury, the illness. What's his full workload in this game? Maybe there's a little bit more risk for Debo because of that. Reed has the best matchup. I just go Jaden Reed. I think the ceiling is so high for Reed, similar to all three of these guys. I think I'd lean Jaden Reed over Debo and Pickens. Flowers or Bateman? Yes, I'm out on Flowers because he's dealing with the ankle injury. I told someone else I think it's okay to go Bateman over Flowers, but this whole game might be run heavy too. Sam Kmet or Laporta. Yeah, it's Kmet over Laporta. Don't drop Laporta. Hold on to Laporta still, but it's Kmet over him for now until we see him get more than 4 catches in the game. Pretty good chance Jaden Daniels Ribs plays. Optimism that he's going to play. I'm not optimistic that you should play him in fantasy though. Pearsall or Yoshavas? I'd go Pearsall over Yoshavas. Wandale or Shepard? I'd go Wandale. Ridley, Watson, Myers. I think it's okay to go Ridley there. I still think Ridley has an interesting ceiling. I'm not playing Javonte over Mason or Kamara. Nope. I play Mason over Cook. I'd play Cook over James Conner. Pick 2, Marv, Lockett, Najee. It's Lockett and Najee, I think, over Marv this week. Let's do this one. Marv versus Najee is probably pretty close. Lockett, I'm a little bit nervous about the weather there, but still think he projects decent without Metcalf in the game. I'm not fully panicked about the weather. Yeah, bench Marv. What's up, Sam? Dak or Burrow with T out? Yeah, so my projections and rankings here for the quarterbacks were before T was ruled out, but I did think T was going to be limited at best. I still think Burrow is a slightly better option than Dak in this game versus the Eagles. I think Chase is going to have a massive game. The one game we saw Chase over 30% target share, he scored over 40 fantasy points this season. Burrow really hasn't had a bad fantasy game since week 1. I think you go Burrow. He's going to be under a lot of pressure like Daniel Jones was last week. I like Dak a lot this week too. It's a super close call. A lot of these QB decisions are really, really close this week after you get past Jordan Love and Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar. Better matchup, though, for Burrow. I think it's Burrow. DraftKings, yeah, I got you with the DraftKings lineup on the YouTube Live. As I continue with some of these start-sits. I already talked through it, so I'm not going to talk through it, but I'll pull it up on screen here on the YouTube Live. Cooper, Diggs, or McLaurin? It's Diggs, then McLaurin, then Cooper. Dobbs or Smith? Yeah, that one's close. Devontae Smith for Dobbs? Definitely a close call there. I think it's Devontae over Dobbs. Yeah, Devontae Smith over Dobbs. Really close call. Dobbs has the better matchup. Dobbs has been better. Dobbins or Mason at flex? Yeah, it's Mason. What are your receiver rankings? I got you. Freiermuth or Schultz? Yeah, it's Schultz over Muth. I don't even have Muth in the top 20. Mahomes or Purdy, Sam? Yeah, it's Purdy. It's Purdy over Mahomes, unless you really want to buy into the Kermit the Frog narrative. And I'm down to buy into it this week. We haven't seen Mahomes go over 20 points yet this season, which is why he's not going to project better than Purdy. He's not going to project better than Kirk Cousins. He's not going to project better than a lot of these quarterbacks. Dak, he's not even projecting. I don't even think he's projecting better than Bo Nix. We go to QBs here. And Purdy gets a good matchup here versus the Cowboys. He's not even projecting better than Bo Nix. But the Raiders made fun of him in the preseason. And we could see him throw a lot in this game because of that. Raiders have not been good. But yeah, it's Purdy. I mean, in all seriousness, it's Purdy. If I have to choose between these two guys, I'm going Purdy unless I'm really in on this Kermit the Frog narrative. Mahomes or Geno? Yeah, that one I think I probably would go Mahomes over Geno. That game has a lot of bad weather coming. The Bills-Seahawks game in Seattle, 25 plus mile an hour wind gusts, no DK Metcalf for Geno. Let me pull up the free player props again one more time to talk through one last time before we head towards the end part of this live stream. Ja'Tavion Sanders over 2.5 receptions. Really think this line should be closer to 3.5 or 4.5. I saw this at -130 before the live started. Josh Jacobs over half a touchdown. Kenneth Walker over 91.5 total yards. That is the free player props of the day. We are 20-11 on the free player props. I'll go to the running backs. I got the tight ends next. Been here since 9. Shout out to you, Flicky. Please help. Devontae Smith or Dobbins at flex full PPR. It's Dobbins. It's Dobbins over Devontae Smith. These running backs over the receivers this week. In a lot of these spots, Dobbins, Javonte, James Cook, Kareem Hunt, Jordan Mason, Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall. All these guys really need to be started if you can find a spot for them. Let's do this comparison quick. But Dobbins is basically a lock for 15 touches at least. And the Saints have been the worst defense versus running backs for the last 2 games. They've allowed almost 100 points to running backs. It's literally in the 80s. They got crushed by Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving a couple weeks ago. They got crushed by Javonte Williams last week, and they're probably going to get crushed by J.K. Dobbins this week. So yeah, it's Dobbins. Better floor for Dobbins and similar ceiling. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Bucky PPR. Yeah, I'd go Marvin Harrison Jr. there. Amari or Diggs. I lean Diggs over Amari. I'd go Caleb Williams over Bo Nix. I'm going Bijan versus Mason. You guys start both those guys. I got Bijan ahead of Mason, though. I'm playing Kyler over Geno with the weather there. I'm okay with that one. I think benching Geno makes sense. Without DK, with wind and rain, I think benching Geno's fine. I'm playing Mooney over JSN. But I'm playing JSN over Wandale and Pittman still. Definitely playing, but JSN still there. I'm playing Mahomes over Tua. I'm playing Hunt over Bigsby. I think I'd play Lockett over Bigsby. That one's really close. Big Kirko or Daniels. Yeah, I want to bench Jane Daniels if I can. I'm going Kirko. Dak versus Caleb or Stroud. Yeah, I lean Dak here. I'd go Dak over Caleb and Stroud. Start Javonte over Neighbors. No, I'm not doing that. Jacobs, Brian Thomas Jr. or Mooney. It's Jacobs. Dell or Dobbs. Yeah, we've had this same comparison come up multiple times. Same thing with Darnell Mooney. Dell, Dobbs, and Mooney, all very comparable. If I go to the wide receiver tiers here quick, we're benching Zay because he's dealing with an ankle injury, by the way. I got Dobbs in tier 4. I got Tank in tier 4, and I got Darnell Mooney in tier 3. I think I'd go Dobbs over Dell, though. I think Dobbs has the better matchup, a little bit better of a floor and comparable ceiling. I think Dell projects a tiny bit better in the Walter Picks app, but I'd lean Dobbs on that one. What's up, Sam? Mason, Hunt, or JT? I think I'd rank them in this order. Mason, then Hunt, then JT. I'm playing Mahomes over Baker. I'm playing Mooney over Amari and Zay. I'm playing Chuba. Oh, man. Chuba, Stevenson, and Bigsby. That one's really tight. I think it's probably Chuba Hubbard over Stevenson and over Bigsby. Wow, they're really, really close. Yeah, I think I actually said Bigsby over Hubbard. I think Bigsby's got a slightly higher ceiling, but Hubbard definitely has a better floor. I'd play Kirk Cousins over Bo Nix. Got you, Kevin. Guys, shout out to everyone in the YouTube live. I try to get to as many start sits as I possibly can. If I didn't get to yours, go to the Walter Picks app. It's going to help you out. McMillan, Keon, or Bateman. I'd go McMillan here. I don't think you can start Keon with the weather there. Bateman's close to McMillan. I think I'd lean McMillan, though. Are you starting McMillan, Ridley, Fergo, or Dunze flex? I'd go Dunze here over Ridley. I'd go Dunze over McMillan. Ridley versus Dunze is actually super close. Ridley probably projects a bit better. Maybe that one is Ridley. That one might. Ridley's dealing with an injury too. Let's see. Dunze. Yeah, it's Ridley actually over Dunze. I'd go Ridley here over McMillan and Dunze. Ridley definitely sneaky ceiling still, but just obviously a really low floor. But Dunze's got a low floor too. Swift, Pollard, BTJ, Olave, Mason, PPR. Pick 3. Yeah, Olave, Mason, and then probably Brian Thomas Jr. over Swift and Pollard. Actually, let's do Swift, Pollard, BTJ for that last spot. That's actually pretty close. Swift, Pollard. I think it's Swift over Pollard. Yeah, it is. And then Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, it's Swift. It's Swift over BTJ and over Pollard. Pollard's in for a good workload, but just a tough. Pollard or Debo might not play. Yeah, Debo is going to play. It does seem like Debo's going to play. Good afternoon, Sam. Garrett Wilson or Javonte PPR? Yeah, don't bench Javonte. Play Javonte. Play Javonte. Play Dobbins. Play these running backs if you have them. Otten or Pitts. I'm going Pitts over Otten. Super close one. I'm playing Tank over Zay. It does look like Kittle's going to play. It does look like Debo's going to play. That game's not till tonight, though. I'm playing Reed over Waddle. Bowers, Kittle, and Pollard. Yeah, I just probably just go with the 2 tight ends here, Michael, and bench Pollard. I don't like starting 2 tight ends, but you got 2 of the top 2 tight ends. I think these are top 2 tight ends. Yeah, they're my top 2 tight ends. I have them ahead of Njoku and Kelsey. Dobbins or Kenneth Walker. Don't bench Kenneth. Play Kenneth over Dobbins. I got Kenneth over 91.5 total yards. It's one of the free player props today. Waddle or Bateman, Olave or Keenan. I go Olave over Keenan. I go Waddle over Bateman. I'd go Olave over Keenan. I would. Adams or Moore. That one's super close. I mean, both in good matchups. It's a tough week to be benching Adams and Garrett Wilson. But yeah, it's DJ Moore over Adams. It's DJ Moore over Garrett Wilson. Flowers, McMillan, or Sutton. Oh, man. Yeah, I think at the Flowers-McMillan decision, I'd go Flowers, even though I'm pretty nervous about him. I'd go McMillan over Jacoby. Wicks or Tolbert. That one's pretty close, too. Let's see this one. I think it might be Tolbert here over Wicks. It's comparable options for sure. Not the number 1 guy, but definitely potential for a ceiling. Yeah, it's Tolbert over Wicks. The difference between Wicks and Tolbert is Tolbert's the clear number 2 receiver, and Wicks is, sharing like the wide receiver 2/3 role with like 2 other guys. Him, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, all kind of sharing this, and Dobbs too. I mean, Reed's the number 1 guy in terms of the upside. Dobbs is the number 1 guy in terms of the floor, and then Watson and Wicks are sort of sharing a similar role. Bigsby, Dobbs, or Pittman at flex. Yeah, it's Dobbs over Bigsby. It's Dobbs over Pittman for sure. That's my time, guys, on the YouTube live. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will continue on the TikTok live for another 10 minutes or so to get the TikTok live subscriber only comments. If you're watching live on YouTube and you are a Walter Pick subscriber, head to the Discord. Link is in the YouTube description. I will be in the Discord over the next half hour, entering as many start sits as I can get to. Also, if you aren't a Walter Pick subscriber, go download the Walter Picks app. You can do infinite start sit comparisons for free in the app. Link to that's also in the YouTube description. Guys, time's the most valuable thing we have. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I do think I'd go JT over Tony Pollard, definitely a close one. And I would go Kraft to over Kmet and Andrews. I think Reed over Debo is fine as well. Have a good one, guys. Good luck this Sunday. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'll be back live Tuesday night, Thursday night, and, of course, Sunday morning next week.